At the party, Arvind, the son of an earl, announces in front of everyone that he is breaking off his engagement with Iora. He doesn't want a drab woman like her and declares that he intends to marry her sister, Whelmy, instead. Whelmy smirks, enjoying the sight of her sister's shock. Today is the best day of her life. Her half-sister is the same age as her. She prefers reserved dresses and old-fashioned accessories. Her hair is unhealthy and has split ends, and her grades are some of the lowest in class. Meanwhile, our female protagonist, the younger of them, possesses a beauty man can't ignore. She wears all the trendiest dresses and high-class accessories. Plus her grades are at the very top of the class. For their graduation party, Arvind chose to act as her escort rather than her sister's. Whelmy smirks at her sister, wondering how it feels now. Her sister accepts the termination of their engagement, and Whelmy wants Iora to hate her from the bottom of her heart. A radiant smile spreads across her face. As she steps into the carriage, the maid Arya wishes her a safe trip. She hopes Iora is seething with rage inside. Her half-sister was harshly criticized as useless, asocial, and unworthy of marriage. 1/2 month after the incident at the graduation party, she was sent away to meet with her new fiancé. After he offered a large sum of money to their father Earl Ernest, and just like that her sister Iora was sold to the famous Marquisades or Mirage, known for his misogyny and a social attitude. He has no equal in terms of looks, and possesses the greatest magic ability of their age. The problem, though, is that he is infamous for his ruthlessness and cruelty. She was forced to sign a contract which said, "Treat me however you like." Upon hearing this, anyone would think her sister is doomed to suffer. So many questions arise. Will she be cast aside immediately? Will she be used in his magic experiments? Or will he beat her so badly she becomes unrecognizable? Their father also declares this place is no longer her home and to never come back if he throws her out. She thinks with a snicker, "Goodbye, sister." Today, Whelmy is going to dress up and go buy some expensive jewelry, since they should have received Iora's bride price by now. She is sure father will laugh and forgive her if she goes a little overboard. Those were the best days of her life, until 6 months later, when she was suddenly knocked to rock bottom. She was born a commoner. Back then, she didn't even have a surname. She lived a life with her mother, which was neither rich nor poor, because her mother was the mistress of an earl. The turning point came when she was 8 years old. Earl Ernest Legal's wife, Iora's mother, died from an illness, and he married her mother. Thinking back on it now, that was probably the beginning of Ernest's family decline. As her parents encouraged her to meet her sister, her eyes went wide. The very first time they met, her eyes shimmered purple, an indication of her strong magic ability. Her glossy silver hair flowed like water. That beautiful daughter of a noble house seemed to shine brilliantly. Iora showed them her impeccable manners. Even though Whelmy wonders what Iora was thinking as she smiled at her, the daughter of the woman who her father had betrayed her mother for. Whelmy dragged her all over the place. She tried to be kind to her. The way she and Iora were treated changed when they were 10 years old. The difference in attitude her parents would sometimes show towards Iora and herself was the decisive factor. She stopped playing with her sister. After that day, her parents spoiled her rotten. Her mother confiscated all her sister's belongings. The jewelry that was a memento from Iora's mother was given to her too. Contrary to her own, her sister's meals became more and more meager. Her sister was given a maid's uniform and forced to do housework. Whelmy snickered, mocking what's with that outfit. It really suits her. She wasn't even allowed to sit at the same dinner table with them anymore. On one occasion, Whelmy told her father her hair color is a real eyesore, and then turned to her mother, whispering that she's scowling at her and she's scared, and asked her mother if she thinks she perhaps has poor eyesight. She declared she doesn't want to see that untidy sister of hers anymore. And so Iora was hidden behind unkempt gray hair she wasn't allowed to brush, forced to always wear glasses, and put in a separate area of the house that she couldn't leave without permission. All of her sister's things became hers, and her hair gleamed like the rays from an angel's halo. The dresses she wore made her just like a queen. When they looked into her vermilion eyes, they couldn't help but feel happy. They were just like jewels. Her mother declared Whelmy will be going to a school for nobles soon, and she will become a fine lady, and that she wouldn't be surprised if she started to get offers of marriage as soon as well. Whelmy couldn't stand if he wasn't a gentleman worthy of having her. One day they received a letter from Arvind Schneeger, who upon meeting Iora's parents expressed how grateful he was that they had decided to accept his proposal that he wanted to marry their beautiful daughter ever since he saw her a long time ago. Iora and Whelmie's father replied they were thrilled to get such a request from soon-to-be Earl like himself. But he almost fainted from shock upon seeing her, that he would have never imagined Iora growing up to be a woman like that. Whelmie sat beside him when, without warning, he pulled her into his arms and whispered that he wished he had chosen her. Later, Whelmie warns her sister not to come near Lord Ervind or her at school. She took everything her sister had. When one of their classmates opposed, saying, "Wasn't Ervind her sister's fiancé?" She doesn't think it is a good idea for either of them to behave in such a manner. She thought that daughter of a viscount is such a meddler and suggested that if that's how she's going to act, why doesn't she go hang out with her sister instead? All she needs are cronies who always take her side. Later, when Whelmie was with Ervind, she told him she heard that spreading rumors about her sister. He smirked and asked if that was bad. She replied of course not. Thanks to that, now her only friend is someone with a weird haircut. It serves her right, but that means there's still a person who wants to get close to Iora. So Ervind took care of that. He started beating the one friend Iora had, telling him not to talk to a person's fiancé without their permission. Snarling, Ervind added, "What does a poor baron's son like him think he's doing?" And Iora could handle that paperwork without his help. The boy tried to argue, saying she was always looking so haggard and there were dark bags under her eyes. Iora also intervened, telling Ervind to cut it out, that he knows, doesn't he? These are the tasks father ordered her to do, and that guy was only sitting beside her. Ervind muttered, lucky for him, his fiancée knows her place, and told the guy to hurry and leave. Later that guy approached Whelmie, saying he really doesn't think so, but still if she instigated this and asked why, if she hated Iora so much, then why did she care so much? Whelmie thought, the fly buzzing around her sister, that poor baron's son was irritating. She remarked what a boring thing to say. If he thought a little about it, he would surely be able to figure it out. She smiled and declared it is because she is too good for a coward like him. He was too weak to even argue with Ervind. By that time, it was already an open secret that Ervind was planning to change his fiancée. And of course, his new fiancée would be her. Both her parents were already working to transfer the heirship over to her as well. Perhaps that's why a lowly, poor baron's son thought he would be a good match for an earl's daughter. If for some reason people began to doubt her chastity, her sister couldn't be sold for a high price. Whelmie thought potential buyers. She needed to evaluate the buyers. There are plenty of buyers in the market for a daughter of an earl, but she wants to sell her for the highest amount possible. Just then, she comes across the Lord of Magic, Hades Omrich. She can see the coldness in his eyes. Those purple eyes are the mark of people with a great deal of mana, just like her sister. Ervind, standing next to her, says that is Lord Omrich. He is from a renowned family, but his reputation is quite poor. Whelmie thinks she has found him, that if it is to him, she can happily sell off her sister. She flings a stack of papers onto the table in front of her sister and says to put her name on this report. She can manage that much, right? She is busy getting ready for a party. She thinks she cannot get lower grades than Iora. With a mocking smile, Whelmie remarks she cannot finish father's work without cutting into her sleeping time since she is so dull, right? She had to be better than Iora at everything, particularly because she knew Iora was smarter than her. Just like that, she made full use of people to steal everything away from her at the graduation party. After selling her off, she completely forgot about Iora as she went on planning her wedding. Until one day, 6 months later, as she's having tea with friends, she finds out Iora attended last night's party with the Lord of Magic. They tell her she was so beautiful they didn't realize until they took a closer look that it was her sister. Ervind laughs, saying they must be crazy. Are they sure they didn't get the wrong person? Whelmie bursts into laughter as well, but later when they see her themselves, they are left speechless. Today's party is to announce their engagement as well as discuss the bride price, which has not been paid no matter how many times they have demanded it. Whelmie then spots the poor baron's son and asks isn't she a bit embarrassed having such a low street as people in her company. Doesn't she think it blemishes the grace she has earned by dressing in such finery? But Iora snaps these people are the most important friends and tells her not to talk about them that way. Whelmie scoffs what? That couldn't be true, that it's only the gutsy daughter of a viscount and a cowardly baron's son. But then Whelmie adds she supposes they suit her much better than she suits Lord Aids, calling them a mismatched pair. Suddenly, the Lord of Magic tells her to shut her mouth. Does she think he will let her get away with insulting Iora? She smirks and says whatever does he mean. She was merely speaking the truth. He states he doesn't recall giving her permission to use his name and calls her a fool who did nothing but hurt Iora. Whelmy acts innocent and says there's been a misunderstanding here. She did no such thing. She wonders who put such silly ideas into his head. However, the Lord of Magic says it seems she is hard of hearing. He has already learned about their family misdeeds. Whelmy blurts she hasn't done anything and turns to her parents, who exclaim that is right, they have never hurt Iora. In fact, she has always been a wasteful girl who refused to work and brought all sorts of trouble upon them. Her father points an accusatory finger at her, saying even though she has earned the Lord of Magic's pity and started taking care of herself more, she's still the same person she has always been. Her reply stalls when the Lord of Magic shifts toward the father, a sudden smirk playing on his lips, and declares as a little entertainment he will expose his crimes one by one. Now begins the judgment for everything they have done to Iora. Happiness gleams in Whelmy's smile. This is what she had planned. She has a vivid memory of Iora from the very first time they met. She was stunning. She didn't know someone so beautiful could even exist. She was so kind to her. Whelby was thrilled to be her friend. She loved her so much. She wanted her to like her. She grew up a commoner, but she studied hard to be as well-mannered as her sister. One day she told her sister the color of your eyes can tell if they are good at magic or not, and her eyes just look like those gemstones called violet sapphires. Iora smiled in return and said her eyes are like garnets. With delight lighting up her face, Whelby exclaims that the river is full of stones and promises to find the perfect gem for her. She has always loved beautiful things. As Whelmy reached for a stone to give her sister, she slipped and tumbled into the river. Although the river was shallow, she still got soaking wet and developed a fever. She stirred from sleep at the sound of someone screaming, "This is all your fault." Jolting awake, she saw her father and mother scolding Iora. She opened her mouth to protest, to tell them it wasn't Iora's fault, but her words caught when her eyes widened. Father and mother are laughing. It was as if they finally had a reason to blame and torment Iora. She wondered who were these people. Her kind sister, her admirable sister. The mark left on her from her mother's slap seemed awfully painful. Her parents made it seem as if they were protecting her, but instead they left her alone with a fever. Back in the present, Whelmy tells the Lord of Magic it is only natural she would be angry. It was her sister's fault she fell into the river after all, that he says that is not what the maid who Iora brought along that day says. It's her maid, Arya, who steps forward, and when Whelmy accuses her of telling lies, she calmly says it is not a lie. That day her foot slipped. Arya, the maid that was with them that day, is 2 years their senior and accompanied her sister when it was decided she would get married. That's why she asked her mother to make her Iora's personal attendant when she went to live elsewhere. Whelmy thinks Arya did well in silence, though outwardly she plays the villain, saying are they really going to take that incompetent maid at her word, and he of all people should know better. The Lord of Magic then says after she began hurting Iora, she also began stealing her things one after another, didn't she? There is no doubt she started that as well. One day, she told Iora, no matter how much she looks at it, her necklace never stops being beautiful. The necklace, always glittering at Iora's neck, was a memento of her. Iora is smiling until her mother declares it would look even better on Whelmy and snatches it from her, giving it to her daughter. Iora cried out that it belonged to her mother. Whelmy knew this was her sister's, but she also knew if she gave it back to her, Iora would be accused of stealing it. So she stored it deep inside her jewelry box, planning to return it to her safely one day once they become adults. After that day, no matter how many of Iora's dresses or belongings were given to her, she stored each and every one away. Then came the day Iora was to leave. Whelmy told the maid to put this in his sister's luggage, so it looks like she stole it. Now in the present, Whelmy says she wasn't the one stealing her things. That's a bold statement. Iora is the only thief here. She wonders why that necklace is around her sister's neck when her mother clearly gave it to her. However, the Lord declares all of the possession has the owner's name engraved on it, which is concealed by magic. And all of it belongs to Iora Ernest. The butler steps forward, saying he can verify that as well. Whenever Whelmy purchased jewelry, she always took the family's butler along as her witness. She also signed all the ownership inscriptions engraved into the gems. Whelmy did all this to leave the family assets to Iora, but if everyone knew the accusations about to come next, They would surely think all this was just a butler acting on behalf of the tormented legitimate heiress. Keeping up with her villain act, she blurts this as pure nonsense, yet inside she smiles, thinking, this is perfect. The Lord of Magic accuses Whelmy of having no shame trying to saddle Iora with all these unfounded crimes that is expected of a wretch such as herself. Her endgame falls short. Everything is going as planned. This act of judgment is only just beginning. Her end goal is just around the corner. The Lord of Magic further reminds her after stealing Iora, things she forced her to dye her hair, made her wear glasses to hide her face, had her wear shabby clothing, and pushed her around like a lowly servant, didn't she? And after all that, she forced her to move to a separate house. Whelmy puts on an innocent expression and says there's been a misunderstanding and claims her dear sister chose to help her servants of her own volition. Furthermore, she moved into the detached house on her own as well because she no longer wanted to see their faces. Whelmy began setting her parents up when she was 12 years old. One time, she mocked Iora, asking why was she wearing that uniform, but she had to admit it really suited her. Whelmy knew this was the only way she could protect her sister. She was forced to do the jobs even the maids hated doing, and the only one who would help her when their parents were not around was Arya. If Iora made even the most trivial of mistakes, her mother wouldn't allow her to have dinner and would yell at her. Whelmy realized she needed to split up Mother and Iora and thought over her next move. At every opportunity, her parents would gleefully talk poorly about her. So she had an idea. What if she disguised her protection as torment? Perhaps she could control the environment around Iora by deceiving her parents. In only 2 more years, they would be going off to a school for nobility. There will surely be people that notice her beauty and unique eye color. What if people with ill intentions took an interest in her unprotected sister? Whelmy decided she cannot let that happen. One day at the table, she casually remarked to her father that Iora's hair was a real eyesore, when in reality she wanted to say she was so beautiful that people couldn't help but look at her. She then turned to her mother saying, Iora is scowling at her and she's scared. Does she think she has poor eyesight? In reality, the color of her eyes draw people in. And with that, she declared she didn't want to see that untidy sister of hers anymore. Honestly, she really wanted her to be dressed beautifully. But she suggested, couldn't she go live in the detached building? Because she doesn't like that maid named Arya, so she too can be isolated in the detached building. Whelmy knew Arya would protect Iora from malice, and she didn't mind if her sister hated her. The Lord of Magic says he is sure Iora didn't want to see their faces, but when she got sick, why didn't they send her firewood or blankets, or have her examined by a doctor? Her father stammers that's because Iora hates doctors. The Lord of Magic remarks funny because when she arrived at his estate, she had a full medical exam without issue and even pleasantly chatted with the doctor. Whelmy thinks to herself obviously her sister doesn't actually hate doctors. Whenever Arya or the butlers reported Iora was sick, their parents didn't lift a finger to help. In fact, they attended a soiree the very next evening that so Whelmy told her maid to urgently fetch the doctor in the middle of the night and to pull out the blankets not being used and sell another gemstone in order to purchase some firewood for the detached building. Those two never went to the detached house anyway, so she was sure gaudily her maid could pull it off. However, there was one other problem, her sister's meals. One day, her father announced that if Iora only knew how to sleep, she didn't deserve to eat. So she grabbed some soup and took it to her sister in the detached building, putting on her best villain act, as she said the crabs would be perfect for her useless sister. Afterwards, she saw the butler sneak in a person who seemed to be a doctor. Only after she saw that could well be go to sleep. The next day, when the butler informed their parents, Iora's fever had finally broken. Just then, Whelmy began sneezing. Her father turned to her, asking if she had caught a fever herself. She only giggled and said maybe someone was talking about her behind her back, that she ate her food, though she couldn't help but wonder if these people secretly wanted her to die. Why did they hate her that much? After that, she continued to help her sister in ways that others wouldn't figure out. She got Iora an outstanding governess. In exchange, hers was mediocre, which was fine with her because as their enrollment to school drew a year closer, she had already made up her mind. She will help Iora escape from this household, and if she is doomed as a result, then she was fine with that. Now, as she faces the Lord of Magic, he says not only has their treatment of her been contemptible, they have used her fortune without an ounce of restraint. He has the evidence to prove it. Whelby tells a blatant lie that Iora was the one burning throughout their fortune. She kept buying expensive magic items one after another. He pulls out Earl's account book, which was sent to him anonymously. It has the cost of the magic items listed. There are 2 account statements, but the listed cost for the same items purchased on the same day do not match. Welby thinks that is because it is fraudulent bookkeeping. The unknown sender of that account book is her. Filling out the account book was the job her father gave Iora. It seems he dumped nearly all of his work except that which required socializing or business discussions onto her. However, he gave Welmy one section to do under the pretext of her learning to keep a household account book. Filling in everything from only one section is actually double the effort. If he was going to make her do it, then he should have just asked her to do all of it, so then he could just check over everything. Welmy realized something was up, and there was a reason he didn't have Iora do this section that Ian ordered to check. She supported one of the receipts given to her to Iora. She spotted her sister outside on a day she wasn't supposed to leave her room, so she quietly followed. She made her way to her father's room and knocked under the pretense of bringing iced tea, exclaiming how unbearably hot it was that Ian truth. The drink was nothing but a cover. What she really wanted was to hear what Iora had to say. Iora mentioned finding 2 receipts for the same item, though the costs didn't match, and she knew at once what that meant. Father was tampering with the amount of revenue. Just then, she splashed the drink over her sister's head, remarking that her mind must be muddled from lack of sleep lately, wasn't it? Welby had no intention of letting her say anything further. Smirking down at her soaped sister, she asked if she had any right to question how their father, the lord of this land, went about his duties. Welby knew if she offends father now, he might take the opportunity to revoke her permission to attend school, and she would end up rotting away at home with her talents unused. She had to do this for Iora. Since father trusted her, it was easy to get the necessary copies. Iora was so busy taking care of all her workload that she simply didn't have the time to do that. The undoctored accounts books were given to her. That's why, when the time comes, it was her job to collect all the evidence. Back in the moment, the Lord of Magic says the handwriting in the account books is hers. She knew, didn't she, that her father has been falsifying his tax reports and committing tax evasion. Welmy blurts, of course not. Father would never do such a horrible thing. She's skilled at playing dumb. If she keeps this charade up, he will surely mention that next, won't he? The Lord of Magic scoffs, repeating he never did such a thing, huh? However, all the magic items Iora allegedly bought on her own were of unknown origins, and shows signs of having once been cursed. That it seems the curses have been lifted by someone, but he has also received information that the buyer was a routine middle-aged man of a noble bearing with a small mustache. He looks down at her father and says he wonders just who these cursed items were for. The father's face fails as he adds it appears to him those things were all put into Ernest's legitimate child's name. Her father blurts it wasn't him and not to look at him like that. Welmy smirks in secret, thinking her father's phrasing and demeanor are no less than a confession. But then she quickly slips back into her role, declaring that it must have been Iora who framed father. The Lord of Magic says it's impossible. The butler and maid have both testified that those items were all found in Iora's room. They are magic items which manifest a curse wherever they are left. That's right. Father was trying to kill Iora. He ordered the butler to collect the items and have them left in her room. The one who broke the curse was her. Although not as good as purple eyes that can control all magic, vermilion eyes have the best aptitude for auxiliary magic. From the moment she caught signs of the items meant to kill her sister, she began to practice desperately. Naturally, possession of cursed magic items is illegal. Her father collapses onto the floor as the Lord of Magic glares at him, declaring what a foolish crime he has dared to commit. Whispers ripple through the onlookers that the Lord of Magic is truly merciless. Welmy can't help but think he really is. That's exactly why she thought she could entrust Iora to him. He is in fact an outstanding man who leads the magic ministry after having unraveled the construction of the cursed magic items he so loathes. The many rumors about his cruelty were disseminated by the people who he has condemned. She knows from her one encounter with him at a party that he's not the man the public says he is. You can only attend soiree once you have reached the age of maturity. Noble students who attend school from age 14 to 18 are able to begin participating halfway through their school career. Once they enrolled, she poured all her energy into turning Irvin's attention from her sister to her. Given his bitterness over Iora's altered appearance, it was easy to win him over. He only cares about a woman's appearance. Perhaps because of the power of her vermilion eyes, she intuitively knows the true nature of the people around her. Maybe he thinks of women as nothing more than tools to satisfy his own desires. He is absolutely not someone she can entrust her sister to. One day, a girl approached her asking if she was the fiancée of that earl's son. When she said no, the girl asked her then why exactly was he clinging to her more than his real fiancée. Ami smirked and remarked so she wanted to know that it was because he wanted to marry her more than her. The girl said if she would tell her more. She smiled and replied she would love to. She didn't need friends. Two half-sisters of the same age that looked nothing alike. The older sister who had her fiancé stolen and the little sister who did the stealing. They were the perfect target for gossip. That was fine by her. She would make good use of this environment, as her bad reputation spread. Soon there won't be a single man around who would call out to someone like her sister with her tarnished honor. This way she could keep men away from Iora. She knew any honest and sensitive person would be able to recognize Iora's true value. She needed someone like that. One day a girl approached Ami and said she didn't think it was a good idea for either of them to behave in such a manner. Carla, the daughter of a viscount. She was a fairly determined and ambitious girl with a quiet demeanor, but also someone who kept others at a reasonable distance. Although she was the daughter of a viscount, her family had a backer that may eventually bump them to earls. It wasn't a good idea for Ami to behave this way. That was certainly true from the point of view of an onlooker. But she did not expect she would put forth such a frank opinion like that in public. This girl needed to be by her sister's side. She suggested if that was how she was going to act, why didn't she go hang out with her sister instead? A few days later, she caught sight of Carla and her sister together. This was perfect. She would drive away any undesirables who try to approach from the outside. And she was sure the people Carla makes friends with would also become good friends to Iora. She made just one miscalculation, though. She couldn't let him near her sister, the Baron's son Leo. He was an annoying fly that began buzzing around her sister before she had time to take notice. His true nature wasn't that bad. However, those calm eyes that seemed to see through everything were dangerous. It was fine if he realized Iora's true nature, but what if he managed to expose her beauty as well? She couldn't let her plan break down at this stage. Iora still hasn't had her coming-of-age party, that if Arvine or some others found out about her beauty while she was still in need of a guardian, Arvine would immediately cast her aside and marry her. Right now, Leo did not stand a chance against a future earl like Arvine. She would have to find someone other than Leo to take Arvine's place once he breaks off their engagement. And so the day of the debutante ball arrived. She couldn't find anyone worthy of her sister. The debutante ball is always hosted by the royal family, that it's customary for the single sons and daughters of the nobility to attend, except under the most unusual circumstances. However, there are not any notable sons still available for marriage. Just then, the Lord of Magic collided with her. Does blue, purple eyes filled with intelligence and self-confidence. Though his face showed no emotion, she could tell from his eyes that he was genuinely concerned there wasn't a hint of any ulterior motive in them. She exclaimed she was okay and apologized to him as well. When she asked her mother, she told her he was a marquis, head of the Ormerich family. He has incredible skill as a mage and numerous great achievements under his belt, for which he was given the highly prestigious honorary title, the Lord of Magic. Her mother also heard he was a cruel man with a heart as cold as ice, that he hates women and socializing. She remarked it was a shame since he was handsome, commands a lot of authority, and he's quite wealthy too. Well, Amy was sure it was just a mask he wore. For some reason, he wished to keep women at a distance, but to her, dealing with people who only cared about looks tedious indeed. She realized Marquis Aides Ormerich, the callous Lord of Magic. He was worthy of her sister, she could tell from just a glance. After finding the Lord of Magic, she began making preparations more carefully than ever before. She needed their consent to entrust Iora to him. In order to do that, she would first need to attract his attention. She wrote down the inner workings and corruption of the Ernest household, the wretched condition of the legitimate heir Iora, and what she would like him to do to secure her sister the witness to it all, and enclosed the location of all that evidence in a letter. Leo asked her why was she giving this to him. She replied even a coward like him can complete that easy mission. That poor Baron's son had somehow been meeting with her sister. She thought she had already driven him away. It was only a minor unease, but after that she had the feeling they were getting closer and closer. They had been meeting without drawing her attention, which was fine. If he was protecting her sister in his own way, then she couldn't help but have a better opinion of him. He might have been annoying, but Leo was someone she could trust. Leo said he had no intention of taking orders from her. Well, Ami said it was her sister that left that in her care. Well, that was a complete lie. Though she had imitated her handwriting, that letter was written by her. Out of the blue, Leo asked if she really hated him, didn't she? She only smiled, saying she couldn't stomach an unprepared baron trying to butter up the daughter of an earl. His own smile sharpened as he replied that it must be nice being so ignorant. She tilted her head and told him if he had something to say, he should just go ahead and say it. Instead, he burst into laughter. This exchange was a gamble. She had made 2 copies of that letter. The first she would have anonymously delivered to the Lord of Magic himself. However, she had no idea if he would even read such accusations from an unknown letter. On the other hand, it was clear Leo wanted to help Iora, so she had decided to bet on him. He gave her a mocking bow and said as she commanded. She scoffed, thinking what an unpleasant man. Even so, he carried out his job as a messenger well. She heard from the person she had entrusted the evidence to that he had passed it along to the Lord of Magic. After that, when Iora received the marriage proposal from the Lord of Magic, she was truly relieved from the bottom of her heart. She knew once he would talk with her a little, he would come to realize she is a person of impeccable etiquette, cutting wit, and stunning beauty. She knew that even if he didn't feel attracted to her, he wasn't the type to treat her unkindly. That he liked her so much he had decided to throw an engagement party was the best outcome. And now for another of her preparations. She delivered a letter exposing that Whelmie's reports were all written by her sister. Since those reports were so well regarded that they had garnered the interest of scouts from the Magic Ministry. The Academy was unable to cover it up, and the truth was made public. The truth of the Master had already been reported to the Lord of the Magic via the letter. And so here they are. The Lord of Magic declares falsifying tax reports is a breach of trust against their nation. At the same time, they will be charged with attempted murder. Her father stutters out he didn't know about any of that it was all Iora. Iora did all of that all on her own. The Lord of Magic asks if he's saying she purchased magic items to kill herself. Without thinking, he blurts she was trying to kill him. Looking disappointed, the Lord of Magic says he should be ashamed of himself. If they even assume Iora did in fact do all this without permission, he would still be guilty of mismanagement and destruction of his duties, as well as making use of child labor. Either way, he's done for. With that, he instructs Attorney General Kildrain to take him into custody, and the knight sees him. His wife quickly blurts that she isn't in league with her husband, that he's the one who manages the finances. But the Magic Council declares she has committed a different crime altogether, marriage fraud. Even Whelmie is taken aback. Whelmie didn't particularly want to punish her mother. Though she mistreated Iora, once her father was arrested, the whole family would break down. No matter how light the charges against her mother and her are, they will certainly go back to being commoners. Then she would be unable to do anything to the fiancé of the Lord of Magic, a marquis. She never planned what was coming ahead. The Lord of Magic declares he has summoned the man who was betrayed by her here. Spellmaster Clark shows up, greeting Whelmie, light platinum blonde hair and vermilion eyes. The disenchantment spellmaster who taught her the basics of dispelling spells. The Lord of Magic introduces him as Clark's Larode, that he holds a professional certification as a first-class disenchanter. And he's sure many of them are familiar with his old friend. A long time ago, he ran away from his ducal family, but he has reconciled with them since being granted the first-class disenchanter qualification, that he turns to her mother and says he is sure she remembers him well, too. She blurts she has no idea who he is. The Lord of Magic glances at Whelmie, leaving her to wonder why he's looking at her like that. She knew they were acquaintances, that's why she asked him to pass the evidence on anonymously, but why is this happening? What's he got to do with mother's marriage fraud? More importantly, was the Lord of Magic looking at her because he has realized she is the anonymous whistleblower? Did spellcaster Clarks expose her plan? No, she doesn't think that's likely. Her eyes tell her he is a tight-lipped and honest person. She met the spellmaster when she visited his clinic in order to dispel the curses on the magic items. That it was the first time she met someone with the same color eyes as herself. Vermilion is an eye color that occurs in family lines that are good at disenchantment. They were commoners when she heard from her mother. It appears in families whose ancestors were nobility. She was skeptical since she had heard her mother grew up in an orphanage. She started to wonder if she was the product of an affair between her mother and a noble man who isn't father. Because she looked nothing like him. On the other hand, when she first met Spellmaster Clates, not only did he have vermilion eyes, but she abruptly cuts the thought, reminding herself that it's not important right now. She begged him to make her his apprentice. He asked her for what reason. She hesitated, wanting him to promise he won't tell anyone. He reminded her he was a disenchanter. He had nothing but visitors with special circumstances, and assured her he wouldn't reveal anything. She knew if she left the house no one would be suspicious, but if she went in and out of Iora's room many times to get the magic items, people would notice. It would take 2 weeks to break the curses if she asked a disenchanter to help. Not all of the magic items are those which can be disenchanted right away by just anyone. But if she's the one to break their curses, then she's the only one who needs to cross that dangerous bridge. She knew if they don't graduate first, Iora's future will be bleak. When she explained everything to him, he asked if she couldn't just report her father. She admitted she couldn't, so he smiled and said she really loved her sister, didn't she? And in that case he would allow her to become his apprentice. After that, she desperately learned disenchanting and pushed aside the unease lurking in her chest. Now the Lord of Magic declares he has verified that they are parent and child based on a man of waveform analysis, and also pulls out that form as the proof. Her mother screams it's a lie, but he counters it's not a lie. He once ran away from his family to marry a commoner woman who deceived and abandoned him. And that was the Countess Isabella Ernest, that he was very active in consoling and treating patients. There are records that he visited the orphanage where she lived fairly frequently. He then says, didn't she meet Earl Ernest while out on the town? A beauty like her, at least on the outside, must have been playing the field. Then she chose the position as mistress to his Earl. She became the mistress to Earl Saverin Ernest, who had newly replaced the previous Earl Ernest. Then the current Earl began to mistreat Iora in order to make Whelmy his heir, rather than the previous Earl's child Iora. According to the records, she is Saverin's daughter, but in reality she's actually the previous Earl's child. Now it makes sense to Whelmy why her mother and father treated Iora so badly. All this time she thought it just wasn't her mother doing it. Even her biological father got in on it. No, now as the Lord of Magic faces her father, he says it seems he suggested it to the previous Countess right after the passing of the previous Earl. If you become my wife and proclaim me the Earl, then I will make my successor the child you had with my older brother. The Earl blurts how did he know that, and how did he get his hands on that? The Lord of Magic replies everything was recorded in the previous Countess' diary. A mana waveform analysis test clearly shows that she and Iora are uncle and niece. But even reflecting on the timing makes it frightfully clear. Iora was born earlier than Whelmy. Considering the fact that Isabella got pregnant before their marriage and the timing of Saverin becoming Earl, it doesn't make any sense if Whelmy isn't the older sister. The Lord of Magic then declares while there's someone carrying the blood of an Earl, there is no one carrying his blood. Because Iora is his brother, the previous Earl's child, and Whelmy is Clark's child. Whelmy stiffens in shock, so her father smiles at her, apologizing that she had to find out like this. Now she realizes, why did the spell master treat her, a mere customer, so well? Why he taught her to disenchant almost any magic item that she could find on the market. He knew but kept it quiet for her. She cannot believe she doubted him for even a second, and is sorry for that as well as for getting him mixed up in the plan that will ruin his daughter, after he looked after her so kindly. The Lord of Magic says the discussion is nearly finished, save for one last detail. At long last, this charade comes to its end. Whelmy steels herself, sure that he's preparing to condemn her as well. At long last, this farce will be coming to an end. She's sorry to her father, even if they've established she is his biological child, that she's still the legal child of the Earl. Even if they suspect that she was acting in an attempt to save her sister in the matter of the cursed items. There is ample evidence that she participated in her torment all this time. She intimidated her for the purpose of switching her reports with hers. She restricted who she could be friends with. She misappropriated the Earl household funds to enable tax evasion. That a few unexpected things came up, but they were trivial in the end. There's no reason to let her off the hook. Without warning, the Lord of Magic turns to Iora and says he's breaking off their engagement. Whelmy freezes, so does Iora. Arvind suddenly breaks in, asking what all this means and what becomes of his inheritance of the Earl's household. He demands what will happen to him, the second son of the Skeeger household now. She bitterly muses that is all this man can ever think about. The Lord of Magic says, as he has informed all here, Whelmy is no blood relation to the Ernests. Now that has come to light, so she has given up her right to succession. And Ervind, her fiancé, has now lost their chance as well. Succession is determined first and foremost by direct blood descent. Having the blood of the noble family running through her veins takes precedence over having been raised as the daughter of that family. Which means she, the daughter of her mother and spell master Clartz, has no right to inherit the title. Hypothetically, for Ervind to retain the right to succeed the Earl's house, he would need to get engaged to Iora, a true direct descendant to take on the title that if her sister were to have a child with him, that child would have the right of succession. However, even if Ervind were to have a child with another woman after inheriting the title, the child would not have the right of succession. But all of this is just hypothetical anyhow. There is absolutely no way Iora would get engaged to a man like him again. And yet, that pathetic man turns desperately to Iora, insisting the Lord of Magic has just abandoned her. Then surely she can be engaged to him again. She wonders how can this man possibly be that dumb that he treated her so badly at school. The Lord of Magic casually lets Ervind know the Ernest house will be no more after this. The price for all these things they have done will be too heavy, unless he knows a better way to pay their debts and make preparations to the nation, then relinquishing their title. His face pales, but then he acts just like the Ernest family. His family is under suspicion of betraying the nation as well, and he looks forward to seeing how that plays out. Ervind collapses to his knees in shock. Whelmy sputters, demanding to know why he has to break off his engagement with her sister. The words slip out before she can stop them, sounding far too much like she doesn't want Iora's bond with the Lord of Magic to fall apart. His lips curl into a smirk that isn't it obvious? She may be the victim here, but she is still an impure woman who shares the blood of a fool. Before he can finish, her hand cracks across his face, the strike so sharp her palm stings. The crowd freezes, stunned, as she screams at him not to dare insult her sister. And then it hits her, she has been exposed. Iora covers her mouth in disbelief. The Lord of Magic admits he is surprised. She has guts to raise her hand against him, that's for sure. Normally, it is impolite to even talk to someone of a higher rank without permission. Not only that, but this man is of the royal bloodline and a marquis, a rank below only that of a duke that no one would bat an eye if he were to cut down the daughter of an earl, a rank lower than him for raising her hand to him. However, that's not the real problem here. Her scheme has been exposed to her sister. Originally, she had planned to die for Iora. Even if she racks her brain, she won't be able to explain this away. At this point, it doesn't matter anymore. She hisses she misjudged him. She thought he believed in the merit system. It seems she was wrong that he asks who does she think she's talking to. She retorts who else could it be but him. How dare a fool like him, who doesn't even recognize the value of her sister, act so smug? Did not he see the reports Iora wrote? In the fields of magicology, she wrote a thesis proposing a magic circle that could lessen the mana burden for healing spells. She developed a hypothesis in pharmacology on a combination of herbs that would improve healing ability. Additionally, her graduation thesis was on how to reduce the workload of healing mages in the field. She bursts out not only that, she finished writing all of them while handling all the documentation of their land and running on barely any sleep. Angry tears fill her eyes as she declares she's so smart. Even the magic ministry where he works asked her to join them. That alone would make her absurdly outstanding. She even continued to run their household in the face of her incompetent father's gambling and her mother's constant waste of money on things like accessories and dresses, and her teenage sister did that, all on her own. Her appearance, her manners, those eyes that show her immense reserve of mana, her acumen in using magic, that if only one thing could be considered a treasure in this world, it would have to be her wonderful sister. There's no reason to let her go and hide her away like that. She tells him just because she's related to an idiot doesn't make her a worthless person to just be tossed aside, that if he's so unperceptive that he hasn't noticed that, then he should give up his title right this second. In an instant, the guard sees her and defeat crashes over her. She thought she had finally managed to save her. She thought once a Varian mother and she were all gone, she would finally be free. She thought she would finally be able to live a happy life. Her tears fall as she admits she thought entrusting her to him would make that wish come true. But she miscalculated. Aides Omrage is a worthless man. Whelmy points at Leo and says she would have rather entrusted Iora to that coward if she'd known this would happen. Arvind snaps at Leo to keep his hands off Iora, claiming she was his before. Whelmy tells him to shut up, reminding him he's the one who broke up with her sister, and tells him right now she and Aids are talking. The comments made here today are accusing them of treasure, so he can go ahead and die already. His face pales, prompting her to fire off. His idiocy really is astounding. Had he really never thought about why the school said students wouldn't be accused of disrespecting royalty as long as they attended? There were rumors before they enrolled at the academy. During the academic year of Whelmy and Iora, there exists a concealed truth that the Crown Prince also registers at the same academy. However, after his sudden hospitalization, no one ever sees him attending in person. Even so, Whelmy becomes aware of his presence. Throughout recorded history, not a single crown prince ever truly attends school, even though noble academies remain an essential part of aristocratic social life. Upon acceptance, an internal directive states that the crown prince only needs to participate in examinations without appearing publicly. As Whelmy investigates further, she discovers a recurring pattern. In every year when a crown prince reaches the appropriate age for enrollment, a baron's son with an unfamiliar family name is admitted at the same time. During that year, Whelmy observes that this baron's son nearly reaches the top rank during the preliminary evaluations. At the same time, the crown prince's name consistently appears at the highest position on the list, yet the crown prince himself exists only as a shadow, never seen nor directly acknowledged. The academic records of the impoverished baron's son are entirely fabricated. He remains silent, existing solely to conceal the true identity of the crown prince, and to draw the attention of those bold enough to approach him once they begin to notice the inconsistencies. The genuine scores achieved by the poor baron's son are exchanged with those of the crown prince, allowing the royal name to remain untouchable while the substitute bears the consequences of obscurity. After reviewing the examination results, Whelmy forms a plan and decides to exchange her academic report with Iora's. Through this act, she fully uncovers the deception and confronts the crown prince, whose true name is Leoniel Lionel, also known as Leo. Whelmy demands that Leo abandon his performance if he truly desires Iora. She assumes that Leo intends to act as a knight operating from the shadows and believes that he fears the king, which prevents him from revealing his identity to Iora in an attempt to protect her. Because of this, Whelmy labels Leo a coward. Whelmy then presses Leo to reveal his status as the crown prince, hoping that he can protect Iora far better than she ever could. Leo refuses to do so. Although he plans to eventually draw Iora to his side, he fails to safeguard the precious life she has at the academy. Leo then acknowledges that Whelmy has already uncovered the truth and chooses to reveal his identity publicly. This revelation shocks Arvind, who notices Leo's purple hair, a distinct mark of royal blood. Following this, Whelmy openly confesses that she and Arvind commit crimes against the people and formally requests the death penalty from the crown prince. Having said everything she wishes to say and seeing her plans completely collapse, Whelmy no longer concerns herself with what happens afterward. Aids responds with laughter, remarking that Whelmy's speech is extraordinary and filled with contradictions. He then explains that Whelmy will not be charged with treason or any other crime presented on that day. Whelmy is left stunned. Aids continues by stating that it is Whelmy who ultimately exposes the crimes of the Earl, and that he merely follows the path she lays out. Aids further informs her that the Attorney General, Kilrain, along with the Crown Prince, writes a letter to His Majesty requesting full pardon for all of Whelmy's offenses, and that this request receives approval. At this moment, Whelmy is truly taken by surprise. Aids explains that the Ministry of Justice routinely protects prosecutors by designating them as witnesses, a practice that has already been established as formal law several years earlier. He believes that Whelmy is fully prepared to destroy herself alongside the criminals, yet Whelmy never once seeks information about this legal safeguard. To Aids, the entire scheme is remarkably intriguing. He is impressed by Whelmy's resolve, especially because she even attempts to manipulate Aids himself in order to force him to act according to her intentions. Afterward, Aids orders the police to remove those he deems foolish, as his business with them has already concluded. Kilrain then clarifies that, for the time being, they still retain their noble status, but their ultimate fate will be decided by His Majesty. He instructs that all of them be taken to the nobles' prison near the imperial castle. Isabella refuses to accept this outcome and insists that everything is merely a misunderstanding. Nevertheless, Earl Ernest, Isabella, and Arvine are escorted away by the police, despite Arvine's repeated claims that he knows nothing of the matter. Aides then turns his attention back to Whelmy and questions whether she truly believes she is in a position to accuse him, or whether she simply dislikes the manner in which he addresses her. In his view, any objection comes far too late. At the same time, Whelmy believes she has already obtained what she desires. She sees that the source of all of Iora's suffering has disappeared, and that alone is sufficient for her. Her miscalculation also results in her own wrongdoing against Iora being forgiven. Even though Whelmy receives a pardon, she has no idea what to do with her life afterward. If she is stripped of her status and cast out as an ordinary citizen without employment, she sees no way to survive on her own. She would rather be punished alongside the others. Yet because His Majesty has already unsealed the decree, there is no longer any possibility of reversing it. Aides then offers Whelmy an additional reward beyond her pardon, presenting it as recognition for her extraordinary ability to cleanse the nation of corruption, including the removal of Earl Ernest. However, Whelmy instead asks that all of that mercy be granted to Iora. By doing so, Iora's graduation certificate will not be revoked, allowing her to demonstrate her abilities freely and pursue whatever path she chooses. Iora feels deeply moved by this decision. Whelmy, in turn, believes that Iora does not truly need her in her life anymore. Aides is impressed by this request and wonders if that is truly all Whelmy wants. Whelmy then asks that Aides refrain from canceling Iora's engagement. Aides harbors a distaste for interfering by taking the Crown Prince's partner, yet Whelmy herself does not trust the Crown Prince. In her view, when cowards face danger, they inevitably betray others. Leo feels that Whelmy treats him with excessive harshness despite the mercy he extends toward her. Although Iora is now free, Whelmy believes that Iora still needs support. She needs someone who can recognize her talent, and Whelmy hopes that Aides can become that person. At the same time, Whelmy begins to question whether Aides' earlier inquiries are merely attempts to draw out her true motives. Aides then leans in and whispers that it may be acceptable to let others invent their own reasons later. This response leaves Whelmy irritated, and she cannot help but wonder why Aides is so adept at unsettling her emotions. Whelmy wonders whether the tension rising within her comes from frustration at the fact that Aides understands every step of her plans, or from anger because Aides has been playing with her all along. She feels that it is both, and at the same time neither. She senses that her lies are incapable of deceiving Aides' violet eyes, as if they see through every layer she carefully constructs. Whelmy then declares that if there is anything else Aides can grant her, she is willing to accept whatever remains within her reach, and she is prepared to do anything Aides demands. Aides, in turn, asks what Whelmy can possibly offer him in return. Whelmy explains that she possesses nothing except her own body, and she presents herself as an object of amusement he may use if he wishes. She admits that she cannot be compared to Iora, yet she still believes herself to be beautiful in her own way. She resolves not to complain, even if Aides chooses to treat her like a servant. If Aides finds no interest in her at all, she asks to be executed or sent to a northern monastery, accepting any decision without resistance. Above all, she pleads with Aides to protect Iora, because that remains her sole desire, the purpose for which she believes she has lived her entire life. Aides responds that Iora expresses the very same resolve, and he questions whether Whelmy is lying. Whelmy insists that she is not. Aides then asks Whelmy to become his wife, a proposal that leaves her completely stunned. He explains that because Whelmy is willing to sacrifice everything to save Iora, he demands her hand in marriage. If she accepts, he promises to save Iora and to provide every form of support Iora needs to live freely according to her own wishes. Whelmy is thrown into deep confusion. The look in Aides' eyes is identical to the one she sees when she first meets him at the debutante ball. Aides explains that he has searched for a girl like Whelmy for a long time. He believes that Whelmy has been planning all of this since she is barely older than 10, and he sees that she already wears a mask at the Noble Academy, just as she does at the ball. Whelmy is shocked that Aides remembers everything so clearly. From Aides' perspective, Whelmy should have been nothing more than one of many respectable women in attendance, with the only difference being that she and Aides happened to cross paths. Whelmy praises Aides as a keen judge of character, a quality that Lady Carla and the Crown Prince are also able to acknowledge. Aides reveals that quite a few people correctly perceive Whelmy's intentions, including the servant, Gordley, and Clarts, who understand her plans from the very beginning. He also states that Iora herself already knows. This revelation leaves Whelmy utterly shaken, as she believes such a thing is impossible. Overcome, Whelmy collapses and admits her defeat. She realizes that the only way to end this performance is her solitary dance upon the stage as a fool, allowing everything to conclude exactly as Aides designs from the start. Aides explains that Whelmy is willing to work relentlessly, to seek the most effective path forward, and to take risks in pursuit of the greatest results. She possesses courage, intelligence, patient perseverance, and even a talent for dispelling curses. He calls her a brave woman, noting that few would dare to plan to use even Aides himself as a piece on the board. Whelmy feels honored to receive such praise. Aides urges her to give him her answer without delay. Whelmy finally accepts his proposal and declares that from this moment onward, she belongs to Aides. Aides then lifts Whelmy and presents her to the gathered guests, announcing her as his fiancée. Only then does Whelmy fully realize that this has been Aides' intention all along, because from the very beginning, he wishes to introduce his fiancée to everyone present, and throughout it all, he never once mentions Iora. After the introduction, Aides assumes that Whelmy may have several questions for him. Soon after, the banquet resumes, and some of those involved in the case withdraw to another room. Kilrain appears only briefly, requesting Whelmy's signature on a witness statement before excusing himself to prepare an official report at a later time. Meanwhile, Whelmy realizes that there is nothing in particular she wishes to ask Aides. At that moment, Iora approaches from behind and embraces Whelmy. Iora feels apologetic for taking so long to help Whelmy escape from the situation. Whelmy notices that Iora looks far healthier than before. She asks Iora not to apologize, explaining that she is not mistreated or harmed in any way. Whelmy also believes that this is not something Iora should worry about, because in truth, Whelmy herself takes too long to rescue Iora from that terrible environment. Iora gently wipes away Whelmy's tears and observes how exhausted she looks, noting the visible loss of weight. Iora assumes that after she leaves the estate, Earl Savrin assigns tasks beyond her capacity to Whelmy and Gordley. Whelmy admits that she cannot handle the work as skillfully as Iora does. She openly acknowledges that she does not possess talent comparable to Iora's. All she can do is endure everything as best as she can, ensuring that the people are not disturbed. To achieve even that, she sacrifices regular sleep and pushes herself beyond reasonable limits. At the same time, Whelmy recognizes that Iora supports her family in the same manner for many years. She also confesses that she commits wrongdoing against Iora. Iora immediately denies this and insists that Whelmy does everything within her power for her sake, even to the point of drawing neglect from Whelmy's own parents. Whelmy hides Iora's appearance from public scrutiny and helps her secure a separate residence. Aria soon joins them. Iora continues by recalling that when she is bedridden with fever, it is Whelmy who calls the doctor and brings her bread porridge. Aria adds that Whelmy claims it is merely leftover food when Aria delivers it. Aria explains that on that day, she is told that Iora does not need to eat, and she is shocked when Whelmy arrives with porridge anyway. Along with it, Whelmy secretly includes several gemstones that once belonged to Iora's mother, as well as other expensive accessories. Aria believes that Whelmy does this so that Iora will not feel distressed if her plans fail. Whelmy attempts to dismiss this as nothing more than harassment. Iora then adds that Whelmy quietly slips ornaments engraved with Iora's name into her luggage, and she cannot understand why Whelmy insists on calling such actions harassment. Whelmy claims that she simply does not realize what she is doing at the time. Iora lets out a soft laugh. Although Whelmy becomes aware that her secrets are fully exposed, she cannot immediately change the demeanor she has cultivated over many years, even though she wants Iora to hate her. Despite everything, Iora continues to hold Whelmy close. Whelmy admits to herself that she deliberately engraves Iora's name on those ornaments so that others will assume she makes careless mistakes, yet receiving gratitude in this way leaves her deeply uncomfortable. After that, Aides arrives together with his attendant. At that time, the attendant presents several accessories purchased using the money obtained from the sale of Whelmy's own jewelry. Whelmy is fully aware that the assets of the Ernest household will eventually be confiscated. For that reason, she sells all of her belongings except for the dress and accessories she intends to wear to the banquet, and with the proceeds, she deliberately purchases large and expensive pieces of jewelry. Whelmy then wonders how the Crown Prince and Carla come to realize the existence of her plan. Leo, the Crown Prince, later explains the sequence of events that lead to his suspicion. The first thing that unsettles him is not merely suspicion, but shock, namely the fact that Whelmy is able to discern his true identity. After Leo accidentally learns that Iora has violet eyes, he investigates her family background and discovers that Whelmy and Iora are sisters. From that point on, his doubts deepen. Leo recalls that Whelmy labels him a coward, even though the person he publicly associates with is not remarkable, and his circle consists only of gossip-loving girls. Despite this, the truth of his identity never comes to light. At that moment, Leo realizes that Whelmy must be pursuing a different objective altogether. He already has a general idea of what is happening, but when he attempts to discuss it with Carla and take action, Iora stops him, warning that it would only create further trouble for Whelmy. Leo does not understand Iora's reasoning at all, especially when he clearly sees that Iora herself is trapped in a far worse situation. As a result, Leo and Carla change their approach. They decide to expose the crimes of the Ernest family and rescue Iora without drawing attention from anyone else. The first step is to secure a private place where Iora can eat properly. Leo possesses a small room along the Noble Academy's emergency evacuation route that is reserved exclusively for the royal family. This space is then modified and transformed into a discreet salon. Next, trustworthy individuals are secretly recruited and instructed to spend time with Iora during lunch breaks and after school. This arrangement proves exhausting for her, but it ensures her safety and well-being. At the same time, Leo must persuade his father to allow Saverin and the others to remain in power temporarily. His father makes it clear that Leo must handle everything on his own, using only the budget allocated to him, with the sole exception of one Imperial Guard assigned as an independent spy. If Leo spends excessive funds on Iora, others may begin to suspect irregularities surrounding the Ernest family. His father also forbids Leo from revealing his identity or proposing to Iora until after graduation. Iora adds that she is still underage at the time and not yet prepared to remove Whelmy from the situation. She explains that if she were alone, she would have left long ago due to the mistreatment she suffers. However, without her testimony, it is impossible for Whelmy to escape. At the very least, it would be impossible for Whelmy to leave while enduring such violence. Furthermore, when Iora notices fraudulent ordering practices and attempts to report them to Saverin, Whelmy intervenes and stops her. At that moment, Iora realizes that Whelmy intentionally arranges for her to notice these issues for a specific reason. Leo reflects that Whelmy also possesses admirable qualities. If Whelmy is not the one to bring the accusations forward, she would most likely be punished for tax evasion regardless, even if she is not directly responsible. At best, she would be stripped of her status and reduced to a commoner, eventually ending up in an orphanage. Iora herself believes that she would have preferred to find a solution together, and she suspects that Whelmy never truly desires such an outcome. Aides remarks that when Iora arrives at his residence and begs him to save Whelmy, he genuinely does not know how to respond. Leo later comments that Aides makes it sound as though he is troubled by the situation, yet when Iora breaks down in tears, Aides simply hands the responsibility over to Leo. Aides then challenges Leo's attitude, implying that Leo dislikes taking care of the woman he loves. Leo reacts with visible panic and hastily clarifies that this is not what he means, urging Aides to stop speaking so carelessly in front of Iora. Aides responds by asserting that his actions ultimately benefit Leo. Observing this exchange, Whelmy senses that Aides' affection toward Leo is sincere rather than performative. Whelmy observes that Aides behaves in a manner entirely different from the cruel impression he presents to the outside world, a glimpse she already catches during her own punishment. She grows curious about whether this side of Aides, one that laughs with a sadistic sense of delight, represents his true nature. At the same time, Whelmy is about to become Aides' wife, and she has already sworn to do anything he asks of her. Aides is a handsome, intelligent, and talented man who appears to take pleasure in tormenting others, and Whelmy finds herself wondering what kind of conditions he will eventually demand from her. She accepts his proposal partly because she has already agreed to it before, yet she feels that it might be better if Iora remains unaware of this development, though that does not mean she harbors hatred toward her. Aides then seeks Carla's opinion. Carla's reasoning aligns closely with Leo's. Because of Whelmy's noble status, many women serve her, and Carla initially approaches her believing that such a connection might prove beneficial. Over time, Carla reprimands Whelmy for constantly remaining at Arvine's side while he neglects his own fiancée. In response, Whelmy rebukes Carla and suggests that she instead spend time with Iora. At first, Carla assumes that Whelmy is being cruel. Gradually, however, she realizes that Whelmy is the only person who never speaks ill of Iora, even while deliberately ignoring the fact that harmful rumors circulate about her. Carla recalls that whenever Arvine and his associates make disparaging remarks about Iora, Whelmy consistently refuses to listen. Whelmy understands that this behavior stems from her unwillingness to hear anyone speak badly about Iora. If they persist, she would strike them just as she once does to aides. Arvine repeatedly misunderstands the situation and grows jealous, believing that Whelmy favors aides. Meanwhile, others conclude that Whelmy despises Iora so deeply that she cannot even bear to hear her name. Each of them constructs their own explanations to justify this belief. Carla then turns her attention to Aides' perspective. Aides considers himself prepared to intervene after receiving a letter from Leo. He also finds himself unexpectedly intrigued upon receiving a passionate letter filled with admiration. This revelation shocks Whelmy, as she knows she never sends any love letter to Aides. Aides later clarifies that the letter praises him extensively, leaving him with the impression that Whelmy is captivated by him and therefore willing to entrust Iora to his care. He is convinced that the letter reflects Whelmy's true intentions. Whelmy feels a surge of panic and embarrassment, while Aides takes clear pleasure in the situation. She views Aides as deeply selfish for interpreting her words in such an overly favorable manner, yet this realization frustrates her further because he is not entirely wrong. At that time, Whelmy indeed longs to capture Aides' attention, though she remains unaware of the complexity of his personality. She wishes she has known this earlier, even as she understands that no one could easily foresee such a thing. After drinking, Aides continues his explanation. Given the circumstances, he is surprised to find Clartz standing at the entrance to his residence, and he feels genuine delight at witnessing the breadth of Whelmy's connections. Clartz asserts that, regardless of everything, Whelmy is his daughter. Whelmy turns toward Clartz and notices that although he is not particularly old, nearly half of his hair has already turned gray. She suspects that this is the result of betrayal by her mother after Clartz leaves the Duke's household. Regardless, Clartz remains her biological father, and the man who teaches her how to dispel curses. Whelmy struggles to determine how she should behave toward him. Even now, she continues to wonder why Isabella acts as she does. After Isabella departs, Clartz has no idea that she becomes Earl Ernest's lover, as he has already severed his ties with the nobility. He is unable to search for her and has no leads at all, since Isabella appears to withdraw entirely from social events until her marriage to Earl Ernest. During that period, Clartz worries deeply about the Liraud family and believes that he is right not to accept Isabella back then. Even so, he never regrets abandoning his noble title. Aides remarks that this is because Clartz always despises the very concept of hereditary titles. Only then does Whelmy learn that Clartz once holds a noble rank. Clartz explains that he is never suited to governing territory and instead wishes to devote his life to helping people through medicine and researching ways to remove curses. Clartz admits that he endures many difficult times, yet he finds satisfaction in his current life, even though a lingering sense of loneliness surfaces whenever he remembers the days he spends with Isabella. At last, Whelmy comes to understand him. Whelmy recalls how her mother frightens her during childhood whenever she searches for excuses to torment Iora, yet Isabella always treats Whelmy with kindness. She wonders whether their lives might unfold differently if Isabella never becomes Saverin's lover. However, even if Saverin chooses a different concubine, Iora would still suffer abuse at his hands, likely continuing even into the present. With that realization, Whelmy apologizes to Clartz, while admitting that she still feels proud of herself for saving Iora. Aides observes that Whelmy grows into a remarkable woman regardless of whether Clartz plays a role in shaping her. He casually refers to Clartz as his father-in-law, a title Clartz clearly dislikes. Aides explains that since Whelmy is to become his wife, there is nothing strange about addressing Clartz in that manner. Clartz counters that even if this is technically true, he asks Aides to refrain from doing so, pointing out that Aides belongs to a generation older than himself. To Clartz, it feels absurd that the eldest son of a duke would be called father-in-law by the head of a marquis family. Whelmy politely intervenes, which leaves Aides mildly surprised, as he believes it is already far too late to start observing formal courtesy. Whelmy explains that her confusion does not stem from their conversation, but from her own social standing. With the House of Ernest almost certainly facing dissolution, she is effectively becoming a commoner. If that occurs, and assuming Iora consents after acknowledging everything that has happened, Iora will become Leo's fiancée, while Whelmy marries Aides of the Marquis family, as promised. Whelmy finds this prospect deeply unsettling. Aides reassures her that the issue poses no problem as long as Whelmy marries before officially becoming a commoner. He explains that he has already arranged for the lands and territory of the Ernest family to remain temporarily under Iora's supervision, as Iora is the one most familiar with their management and the inheritance documents. This revelation shocks Whelmy. Iora then elaborates that even if the state reclaims the title, it will take considerable time before the royal family assumes direct control of the territory or grants it to another noble. For that reason, Iora is temporarily installed as countess. Once she formally inherits the territory, she only needs to retain the title, after which she can become engaged to Leo, resolving the situation entirely. Whelmy then turns her thoughts to her own fate. She wonders how she will be treated in terms of kinship if she loses her inheritance rights due to her lineage. Since this is not a divorce, she questions whether she will still be regarded as Iora's younger sister and thus remain eligible for engagement. At this point, Aides calls Clartz over, and Clartz immediately understands the concern. Clartz explains that after reconciling with the Liraud family upon becoming a first-rank mage, he is compelled to accept the title of Earl, despite possessing no land of his own. He formally acknowledges Whelmy as his daughter, supported by strong evidence, and states that the Liraud family should therefore accept her existence. Whelmy shyly admits that she is indeed Clartz's child. Clartz approaches her and explains that he personally conducts the mana wave analysis to verify her lineage, and that he himself raises Whelmy as his apprentice. He adds that even though the blood of a treacherous woman flows through her veins, he asks whether he truly looks like a teacher who would abandon a talented and endearing student. Whelmy timidly thanks him and finally refers to Clartz as her father. Clartz remarks that this outcome is not bad at all. Iora then points out to Aria that Whelmy still wears the same shy smile she always has, and she affectionately refers to Whelmy as her cute younger sister. Aria agrees, still unable to believe that she can see Whelmy smiling like this again. Leo observes that Whelmy usually smiles with a self-deprecating air, but with this expression, she gives off the same impression as Iora. Clartz finds it curious that despite lacking a blood connection, Whelmy and Iora share such a resemblance, and he hopes that Whelmy can always smile in this way. Aides comments that everyone truly seems to adore the woman he now calls his wife. While he acknowledges that this is praiseworthy, he admits that it does not particularly interest him, and he asks Whelmy to resume behaving rudely toward him instead. At this point, Whelmy feels that everything has gone far beyond reason. She breaks into laughter and realizes that, for her at least, this situation is not so bad after all. Late at night, after the engagement announcement banquet draws on, the honored guests gradually take their leave while the event is still winding down. Whelmy is soaking quietly in a bathtub. Once the reception fully concludes, she is escorted to Aides' second residence, where she is placed under care. Aides forbids Whelmy from leaving the house for the time being, believing that any outings would pose unnecessary danger. She remains under temporary protection until the scandal surrounding the Ernest family is largely resolved. Since the era of Aides' father, the Ormridge family has made it a practice to shelter children from fallen noble houses. This protection extends to victims of crimes, relatives of perpetrators, widows, and daughters whose families decline after the death of a patriarch. Only then does Whelmy fully understand why she is permitted to remain under Aides' protection. To her, this arrangement clearly demonstrates both Aides' authority and his long-established record of influence. After bathing, Whelmy is guided to meet Aides, who is already waiting for her. She assumes that Aides intends to take her to bed even before their marriage. Earlier, she declares that she is willing to do anything Aides asks, regardless of how he treats her, and she understands that by making such a promise, she forfeits the right to refuse. Aides, however, responds with laughter and urges her to calm herself, that he questions whether Whelmy truly believes she could love someone as unreasonable as him. Whelmy regards Aides as a renowned master of magic, known within high society as someone often considered inhuman. In response, Aides suddenly pulls her close, embraces her, and kisses her without warning. Startled, Whelmy feels overwhelmed and questions whether such behavior makes sense. Aides explains that he behaves this way because he assumes it is what Whelmy prefers. He kisses her again, but this time Whelmy resists, prompting Aides to question the reason for her reaction. Aides expresses surprise, noting that he never expects someone who clings so shamelessly to a man in public to respond in this manner. He insists that Whelmy answer him and demands to know why she wears such an innocent expression. Whelmy realizes that Aides clearly understands the reason and appears to be enjoying her discomfort. She explains that when someone she despises touches her, all she feels is revulsion, and that situation is entirely different from what she is experiencing now. Whelmy reflects that she never fully opens herself to Arvine. She merely allows him to touch her body and holds onto his arm, doing whatever is necessary to prevent him from going to Iora's residence. In contrast, Aides makes it clear that he will not permit Whelmy to wear a mask when she is alone with him. In response, Whelmy can only think that Aides possesses a distinctly unusual taste. Whelmy then begins to question what it is that Aides likes about her and why he appears so genuinely pleased. From his manner of speaking, she assumes that Aides views her actions in helping Iora escape in a favorable light. Even so, Whelmy suspects that Aides may simply regard those actions as proof of her competence as a household manager rather than anything more personal. She is aware of the prevailing belief that Aides harbors a strong aversion toward women, to the extent that noble women hesitate to approach him. There are no rumors suggesting that he has ever touched a woman. With his appearance, his achievements as a marquis, and his overwhelming authority, Aides could easily choose any woman he desires. This is precisely why Whelmy places her trust in him and assumes that he will recognize Iora's intelligence and worth. Still, she finds herself wondering what kind of relationship Aides is actually trying to build with her. From Whelmy's perspective, Aides seems to be playing with her emotions and taking pleasure in her reactions. Aides indicates that her question is a simple one and easily answered. He explains that Whelmy is not the only one observing others at the party where they first meet. This leads Whelmy to wonder whether Aides has been watching her all along. At that point, Aides asks her to address him by his name alone, without using any title. Whelmy believes that calling someone by name without honorifics signifies deep affection, and she only then realizes that Aides has been addressing her in the same manner for quite some time. She asks him for the reason behind it. Aides explains that his interest begins when Whelmy looks directly into his eyes, as though she is greedily searching for something within them, only to abruptly change her attitude as if she does not want him to notice. He observes that in Whelmy's eyes, there is not even a trace of the desire that other women usually display when they look at him. Whelmy remarks that this is hardly surprising, since at that time she is simply searching for someone she can trust to protect Iora. Aides gently runs his fingers through Whelmy's hair and wonders whether she falls in love with him at that very moment, because she is looking straight into his soul. Whelmy immediately grows embarrassed and denies such a notion, thinking that Aides is being far too forward. Aides reminds her not to hide her true self when she behaves in this way, as doing so would hurt his feelings. He then presses a kiss into her hair, causing her heart to race uncontrollably, and asks her once more to give him an answer. Whelmy finally acknowledges that it is true she is influenced by Aides at that time, and that what she feels is not an impulsive emotion such as love at first sight. She senses something fundamentally different in him compared to Arvine and her classmates, who merely stare at her outward appearance with blunt and careless interest. Aides is the type of person who can dig into another's true nature and accurately assess what kind of counterpart he is facing. From the moment they meet, Whelmy and Aides share a similar disposition, and it is this similarity that quietly captivates her. Even before exchanging words with him, the more Whelmy learns about Aides, the stronger her feelings grow, despite the fact that she never openly admits them. From Aides' perspective, even he would be drawn to a woman of similar age who looks at him with sincerity, especially when the man standing beside her appears entirely ordinary and ill-suited to be her partner. He senses that Whelmy views him in the same way he views her, and he becomes confident of this realization. Even so, he does nothing about it at the time. 2 years later, when Aides receives a letter from Whelmy, the memory of the woman from that period resurfaces. This rekindles his interest, prompting him to begin investigating Whelmy more closely, and it is at this point that he requests a report from Iora. Just as Ade starts gathering evidence regarding Earl Ernest, Leo brings him a copy of a letter identical to the one Ades has received. From that moment on, Ades' interest in Whelmy becomes unmistakably genuine. Whelmy wonders whether Ades has already considered all of this before approaching Leo about the letter, especially since the sender is anonymous. Ades proceeds with great caution at first, deliberately acting so that Leo does not discover the true origin of the letter too early. He explains that Whelmy overlooks a critical detail that ultimately exposes her plan, namely the fact that handwriting cannot be perfectly forged. As Whelmy tries to deny it, Ades continues by pointing out that she deliberately imitates Iora's writing style. Whelmy has countless opportunities to observe Iora's handwriting, yet no matter how often she imitates it, her own distinct characteristics inevitably remain. Iora's handwriting is refined and elegant, whereas Whelmy's handwriting appears soft, rounded, and endearing. The handwriting in the letter matches that of the reports previously submitted under Iora's name. From Whelmy's perspective, this only proves that she is not skilled enough at imitating her sister. Ades, however, clarifies that Whelmy and Iora possess entirely different talents, and that Whelmy's abilities cannot and should not be measured against Iora's. In fact, Ades has been searching precisely for a woman like Whelmy. Whelmy, however, cannot truly comprehend this explanation. She finds it impossible to imagine that there is anything she excels at more than Iora, and the thought leaves her genuinely confused. Whelmy then questions why Ades looks at her with such unmistakable admiration. Ades explains that she and Iora are profoundly different in personality, appearance, and even in the way Whelmy expresses kindness, that he asks bluntly whether Whelmy would have allowed that foolish Arvine to kiss her. Whelmy recalls several occasions when Arvine had sought that kind of intimacy. She asks whether Ades is disappointed by it. Ades replies that he feels no disappointment at all. In his view, it is not unacceptable for an actress to kiss someone on stage. What matters to him is that everything belonging to Whelmy when she removes her mask, everything that is truly hers, is his, including those lips that were once taken. To Whelmy, this feels nothing like the unpleasant sensations she experienced with Arvine. Instead, it is strangely sweet, like a warm heat tightening gently within her body. Ades asks if Whelmy dislikes him. She answers that she does not. Ades then tells her not to look at him like that, because it makes him want to take everything from her immediately, even though he would rather take his time and savor it. He declares that now it is Whelmy's turn. Flustered, Whelmy protests that it is impossible, that this is far too embarrassing. Her heart already feels as if it might burst just from being held like this, and now she is expected to do something herself. Ades calmly reminds her that she said she would do anything he wanted. To Whelmy, this feels profoundly unfair. She thinks it is unfair because from now on, Ades will always make demands like this of her. Still, she asks him to close his eyes, and Ades obediently does so. Gathering her courage, Whelmy presses a light kiss to his forehead. Ades is visibly startled. Whelmy hastily explains that he never specified where she was supposed to kiss him. Ades accepts this without complaint and says that it is fine. He then suggests that they move somewhere else. Together they go to the bedroom, where Whelmy is gently but firmly laid down on the bed. Ades tells her that he knows she is exhausted after everything that has happened today, so he will not do anything. He declares that from now on, this room belongs to Whelmy. When Ades leans closer, Whelmy instinctively tries to retreat. Ades tells her that she cannot refuse him, because she now belongs to him. To Whelmy, Ades feels like a kind of poison, one that slowly erodes her sense of self. The deeper she is ensnared by him, the more certain she becomes that Ades will never allow her to escape for the rest of her life. She senses that this is her misfortune, and with that ominous premonition lingering in her mind, Whelmy finally falls asleep. Half a year before the punishment ceremony, Ades is carefully examining a letter that Leo hands to him. His attention remains fixed on the contents, as he considers the intention behind Leo's decision to reveal it. In his assessment, he reflects on what Leo aims to achieve by bringing such a document directly to him. Leo, as usual, acknowledges Ades' sharp intellect and expresses his familiarity by expecting to be addressed by name when they are alone together. Ades, however, maintains a clear stance that allowing a subordinate to show a lack of respect toward the crown prince would only cause Leo's authority to erode little by little over time. Leo, for his part, makes a distinction in his reasoning, recognizing that such a loss of authority might apply if the disrespect comes from ordinary subordinates. He then shows clear dissatisfaction toward the assumption that he is ignorant enough to behave crudely in private toward a man who believes himself to wield power greater than that of the royal family itself. The Ormerich family holds influence so immense that even the royal family cannot afford to disregard them. Despite the absence of royal blood, the Ormerich stand at the very summit of the nobility. The lineage of the Lionel royal family cannot be traced or discussed without inevitably invoking the name of Ormerich. In the era of the former monarchy, the Lionel family governs extremely dangerous border regions. Although they excel in the art of warfare, they lack strong magical abilities. This limitation leads them to seek the magical power inherent in the Ormerich bloodline, a lineage known for producing many exceptional mages. In return, the Ormerich family receives battle instruction and military guidance from the Lionel family for their own soldiers, and through this exchange, a strong bond is gradually formed between the two houses. At the same time, negligence under the previous royal rule allows magical creatures to roam freely, resulting in widespread disasters and plagues that spread evenly across all territories. Faced with the suffering of the people, the Lionel and Ormerich families rise together and overthrow the former royal family that has brought such hardship upon the realm. After this upheaval, the Lionel family inherits the crown, while the Ormerich family chooses to remain politically neutral. Even so, the Ormerich continue to extend a deep and enduring friendship toward the royal family, retaining tremendous influence that persists to the present day. Leo and Aides themselves also share a close relationship that begins in childhood, shaped by this long-standing alliance. Returning to the present moment, Aides concludes that the letter in question must originate from Whelmy. Leo reacts with curiosity about how Aides reaches such certainty. Aides explains that this is the second time he has encountered the same letter. This realization leads Leo to suspect that the letter Whelmy gives him might be nothing more than a spare copy. Aides considers that Whelmy may be uncertain whether the anonymous letter is truly read or not. However, if Whelmy has already realized Leo's true identity, then her actions suggest that she has treated Leo merely as an errand boy. Leo remains aware that everyone within the Lionel kingdom knows of the deep connection between the royal family and the Ormerich. He recalls that Whelmy claims the letter comes from Iora, yet when he later examines the matter together with Iora, that claim proves to be false. From this, Aides infers that Whelmy does not fully trust Leo. Leo believes this distrust is understandable, as Iora explains that Whelmy does not want Leo to realize that she is actively trying to save Iora, and he considers this motive to play a significant role in Whelmy's attitude. Leo further reflects that because he and Iora are unable to associate openly during their time at the academy, he assumes there is little chance he will uncover Whelmy's deception. Aides, however, judges that Whelmy likely does not care at all if the truth eventually comes to light. From the contents and structure of the letter itself, Aides senses that Whelmy's preparations appear to be fully in place. Aides explains that within the letter, Whelmy entrusts evidence of fund embezzlement committed by the Ernest family to someone she considers both reliable and remarkably compelling. Leo seeks to know the identity of this individual, and Aides identifies him as Clartz Liraud. This revelation strikes Leo as genuinely unexpected. He also finds it curious that although Clartz and Whelmy reside in the same city, Whelmy is able to form such a close connection with a first-tier mage. However, when Leo considers the distinctive color of Whelmy's eyes, the situation no longer feels particularly strange to him. Aides notes that he has never heard of any familial connection between the Ernest and Liraud families. Leo acknowledges that this assumption aligns perfectly with his own conclusions. Aides then clarifies that the bond the Liraud family shares with the royal family differs greatly from the bond maintained with the Ormerich family. The Liraud lineage originally descends from elementalists who excel in the use of spoken curses, as well as their removal. Aides elaborates that ordinarily, overriding the will of an elemental and forcing submission requires an enormous quantity of mana. In contrast, the Liraud are favored by elemental beings themselves, as their bloodline allows them to petition the elements to lift curses not through conventional magical techniques, but through incantations. Unlike common magical contracts, elementals do not form master-servant relationships with humans. Their actions are driven solely by affection or offered as gifts. Red eyes stand as the visible sign of the Liraud family's blessing. In Aides' assessment, no other bloodline within the Lionel kingdom, aside from those connected to the Liraud family, has ever manifested such a blessing. He further explains that the Liraud family deliberately conceals the truth about elementals from everyone except those who stand closest to the royal family. Although many nobles view Whelmie's eyes as unusual, they do not grow suspicious. Even though the appearance of vivid red eyes within collateral branches of a family is rare, it is not entirely unheard of. What truly captures Aides' attention is the fact that Whelmie maintains a connection with Clartz. He initially assumes that Whelmie inherits her blessing from her mother's side. However, given that Whelmie is originally an orphan of common birth, the likelihood of her mother possessing such a lineage is extremely low. From this, Leo speculates that Whelmie's mother may have been involved in an affair. Leo considers the possibility worth further investigation, reasoning that if Whelmie is indeed connected to the Liraud family, then only one individual could plausibly be the partner involved in that affair. As Leo reflects further, he finds that the more he learns about Ernest's parents, the more distasteful and vulgar their character appears to him. Aides then inquires whether there is anything else contained within the matter. Leo reveals that Iora has been subjected to torture. He explains that when he once attempts to intervene and help her, Iora stops him herself, insisting that she cannot disrupt the situation until she discovers a way to save Whelmie as well. To Aides, this realization forms a difficult and heavy understanding. It is at this point that he becomes aware there is no rivalry at all between the two sisters. Aides proceeds to question Leo's motivation for delivering the letter, especially considering that Leo harbors no favorable feelings toward Whelmie. Leo explains that he acts because he believes he has the right to judge the situation himself. In his view, Whelmie's behavior in general offers little that deserves praise. However, when her actions are considered as an effort to save Iora, they become undeniably commendable. Leo observes that Whelmie is exceptionally skilled at concealing her true emotions. He recalls that when Iora first discloses everything to him, he is fully convinced that she must be under the influence of some kind of potion or external control. Over time, it becomes clear that Iora is completely sane. Even so, it takes Leo a considerable period to place full trust in her, partly because of the open hostility Whelmie directs toward him. When Aides presses for the reason behind this, Leo explains that Whelmie labels him a coward. Aides reacts with amusement, prompting Leo to admonish him for laughing. Leo elaborates that Whelmie believes he is too afraid of his father to reveal his true identity and take action to help Iora. Aides laughs again and remarks that Whelmie is a woman driven strongly by her own interests, even though she is fully aware that Leo is the crown prince. Afterward, Aides presents a single sheet of paper. Leo examines it and seeks to understand its nature. Aides explains that it is a document concerning Whelmie that is sent to him from the academy, yet the handwriting does not match that of the letters in question. As Leo reads it, he feels an immediate sense of discomfort. He suspects the document belongs to Whelmie, yet the subject matter aligns closely with the research topic Iora previously mentions to him. Aides then produces another report, one that is believed to be written by Iora, and the handwriting in this report matches that found in her letters. Leo carefully observes the similarities and finds them striking. Aides explains that without close and deliberate examination, Leo would never notice the differences between the writings, or perhaps it is more accurate to say that the similarities are intentionally crafted. He then asks Leo for his opinion on the matter. Aides reasons that most people would conclude Iora is the true author of the letters, while Leo knows with certainty that they originate from Whelmie. Yet without Iora's explanation, Leo might never have realized the truth. Some portions of the letters even imply that Iora's report has been replaced. If Leo focuses solely on the content without scrutinizing the handwriting, and without knowing the sender's identity, he acknowledges that he could easily have been deceived. Leo reflects on how the letters appear to suggest that Iora is accusing her own family, including Whelmie, of criminal activity. Aides questions whether this indicates the absence of conflict between the two sisters. Leo affirms that if Iora's words are to be believed, then that conclusion stands. From this, Aides determines that Whelmie's plan includes deliberately framing Iora as the sender, a notion he finds deeply intriguing. As his thoughts settle, Aides remarks internally that the sight of red eyes draws his memory back to the very first time he becomes captivated by a noblewoman. Aides states that Whelmie also intends to be cursed. This revelation shocks Leo, and he struggles to understand the reasoning behind such a decision. Aides explains that this element is precisely what would lead others to believe that Iora is the true sender of the letters, and that Whelmy is even willing to go so far as to include herself in such a fate. Leo finds Aids' analysis difficult to accept and cannot immediately bring himself to believe it. Meanwhile, Aids begins to consider that it may be more effective for him to involve himself directly in the plan rather than remain a distant observer. Aids reflects that his final decision will depend on the contents of the formal accusation, as the letter also specifies that the evidence will only be handed over after he becomes engaged to Iora and escorts her out of her household. This condition leaves Leo deeply startled. Aids quickly reassures him, making it clear that he has no intention of acting as a villain who would gladly steal Leo's beloved. His true intention lies in adjusting the scheme slightly once he steps into the game himself. Leo seeks to understand how Aids intends to do this. Aids explains that if Whelmy truly matches the image he has formed of her, and if his involvement does not conflict with what Iora has asked of Leo, then he wishes to choose Whelmy as his own partner. He outlines that he will enter a temporary engagement with Iora solely to free her from her household. Aids further explains that Whelmy is a courageous woman who willingly exploits her own position for the sake of her elder sister, and for that reason alone, he finds himself more inclined toward Whelmy. He already understands that Whelmy would never consent to Leo becoming engaged to Iora, and therefore, if she agrees to this plan, that particular aspect will remain unchanged. Aids then challenges Leo, stating that if Leo possesses another method to save Iora, he wishes to hear it. He also advises Leo to demonstrate his own personal strength, rather than relying solely on the authority of the royal family. Leo responds by outlining his intention to use Whelmy as a witness. Through this approach, he believes they can prove that Whelmy is not guilty of the crimes in question, even though he acknowledges that he cannot completely avoid making use of his status as a prince. Aids considers this approach viable, provided Leo does not intervene excessively. He points out that if only Leo's initial plan is carried out, both Iora and Whelmy will be stripped of their titles and reduced to commoners. As a result, neither of them would retain any possibility of marrying Aids or Leo. Aids then asks whether Leo is capable of formally recognizing Iora as a countess and allowing her to inherit the Ernest family lands. If Leo can accomplish this, Aids believes Leo would also be able to offer a strong recommendation on Whelmy's behalf. Leo invites Aids to proceed with this course of action. In addition, for Iora's sake, Leo resolves to persuade the Prosecutor General, Kilrain. Aids judges that Leo has passed this test of resolve and urges him to carry it out. Leo states his intention to propose to Iora immediately after the engagement is annulled. After these matters are settled, Aids finds himself wondering how much Whelmy has matured since the first time he sees her. Judging from her letters, he concludes that Whelmy has grown remarkably, doing so without losing that essential spark within her. With his thoughts organized, Aids writes a letter of his own and hands it to his attendant, instructing that it be sent without delay. Aids briefly asks whether Leo is deliberately withholding the most important part, namely how a man he deeply cherishes and already regards as a younger brother comes to find a woman he desires as his wife. The question catches Leo off guard, causing him to choke slightly on his drink, and he immediately thinks that he should have excused himself earlier. He then deflects, insisting that there is nothing special he can share with Aids. Aids, however, remarks that Leo is remarkably bold for attempting to conceal a secret from him. In his own thoughts, Leo reflects that there are clear reasons why he has not been engaged until now. First, during his childhood, his body is frail and weak. Second, he is never placed in a situation that demands an urgent engagement. Third, it is customary for a crown prince to choose a fiancé only after reaching an appropriate age to attend the Noble Academy. Once Leo's health improves, he is formally granted the title of crown prince without incident. After that, he continues to rely on this tradition as a justification for postponing the selection of a fiancé, and his father shows no particular haste in pressing the matter. If Leo is ever to choose, he desires a woman wise enough to replace him should the need arise, and Aids is fully aware of this preference. Aids comments that at first glance, Iora's qualities do not appear especially remarkable, and he has only heard unfavorable remarks regarding her appearance. Within noble society, Iora is reportedly mocked as a coward when compared to her younger sister. Leo interprets this as confirmation that Aids already knows the situation, which aligns perfectly with Aids' nature. When Aids takes an interest in someone, he enjoys provoking them and causing mild irritation, though he never crosses excessive boundaries. Conversely, he remains indifferent toward those who fail to capture his attention. Because of this demeanor, Aides earns a reputation as an inhuman ruler of magic, as well as being labeled misogynistic and antisocial. Leo explains that Iora's poor reputation and plain appearance stem from her constant habit of prioritizing her younger sister, who is considered inferior in terms of bloodline. Although Whelmy possesses red eyes associated with the Liraud family, she is still the illegitimate child of a woman who originally comes from commoner origins, and many noble parents continue to place great importance on lineage. In this regard, Whelmy is no match for Iora, whose parents both belong to legitimate bloodlines. Leo reasons that if Iora were to stand out openly for her intelligence, more people would be willing to overlook her appearance. Instead, Iora establishes a rule for herself to always appear inferior to her younger sister, extending even to maintaining average academic scores. Like Leo, others eventually realize that Iora deliberately conceals her true self. Aides questions why Leo becomes involved to such an extent. Leo explains that Iora once tells him that failing to act this way would interfere with what Whelmy is trying to accomplish. In addition, Iora's parents dislike the idea of Iora being more successful than Whelmy. Iora also tells Leo that Whelmy would feel distressed if she were scolded. At first, Leo does not fully understand what Iora means by this, but over time he begins to question whether that claim truly reflects the feelings of the woman he perceives as cruel. He notices that even when he makes a mildly negative remark about Whelmy, such comments are enough to sadden Iora. Through this realization, Leo understands that describing the sisters as merely close would be deeply misleading. He concludes that although Whelmy and Iora genuinely love one another, Whelmy deliberately attempts to make Iora resent her. When Aides asks for the reason behind this, Leo explains that it is all done to divert their parents' attention away from Iora. He elaborates that both sisters understand exactly how they are expected to behave in order to satisfy their parents, and they consciously play those roles with full awareness. From this, Aides comprehends that Whelmy is striving to save her elder sister, who is forced into becoming a victim of circumstance. Aides feels genuine admiration for Whelmy's efforts, while Leo observes that Aides seems to have developed a strong liking for Whelmy despite having met her only once. Aides then asks whether Leo intends to avoid explaining how he and Iora come to fall in love. Leo realizes that changing the subject will no longer be easy. Accepting this, he finally complies in a respectful manner and proceeds to recount the story to Aides in full. Some time before he meets Iora, Leo finds himself confused and frustrated as he observes how foolish the sons and daughters of nobles can be. He begins to wonder whether this is what his father truly intends him to see. In the past, Leo's father explains that there is still value to be gained from attending lectures, provided they are sufficiently specialized. He openly acknowledges that the regular curriculum is likely to be dull, as it merely repeats knowledge Leo has already mastered. Even so, his father insists that studying at a prestigious academy like this offers an opportunity for both of them to experience something exceptionally valuable, something that is difficult to obtain through any other means. Leo asks what his father means by this, only for his father to respond with a question of his own. Leo answers that perhaps the purpose is to find companions with whom he can feel at ease, but his father dismisses this as incorrect. Leo then suggests that it might be an opportunity to find love, yet his father immediately rejects that answer as well. Leo senses that his father believes it would be foolish for him to fall too deeply in love and risk his position as crown prince. Although Leo hears that his father meets his mother at a noble academy and that they later fall in love and marry, he understands that their union is ultimately advantageous to both families politically, with romantic feelings never factoring into the calculation. From this, Leo concludes that the true answer lies in attending school and interacting with others without allowing social class to become a barrier. His father tells him that this answer is not entirely correct. He explains that this is a school Leo must attend while concealing his true social status. According to his father, this is an opportunity for Leo to witness class-based discrimination from the perspective of those who suffer from it. Leo is puzzled and asks whether the experience truly feels different when social class is not used as a dividing line, and his father confirms that it does. His father goes on to explain that attending school is an essential experience for carving lasting memories about the origins of the Lionel family. He instructs Leo never to forget that while distinctions between people may be necessary, discrimination inevitably leads to conflict. This principle has long been upheld as a guiding motto of the Lionel family. Before they ever inherit the crown, the Lionel judge people by their achievements, whether they are commoners or nobles, and it is through the support of all these people that the Lionel rise to become the royal family. Even now, the Lionel continue to receive such support, while at the same time listening to the voices of the less fortunate, a responsibility they must uphold in the future as well. With these experiences in mind, his father assures Leo that he will come to understand this lesson deeply. Less than a month after beginning his studies, Leo finally grasps the meaning behind his father's words. He witnesses countless individuals using their status and outward appearance as a banner under which they belittle others. During his time at the academy, Leo's assigned identity is that of the second son of a baron. By using a long-developed magical artifact that alters one's appearance, an item that can no longer be reproduced in the present era, Leo dyes his purple hair and golden eyes black. Anyone who truly pays attention could still recognize his disguise, as his facial features remain completely unchanged. In addition, there is no noble family bearing the name Metamo. Furthermore, the Academy enforces a regulation stating that no one will be held accountable for disrespectful behavior toward any member of the royal family attending the school. This rule is deliberately designed to prevent suspicion, despite the many clues surrounding Leo's true identity. Even so, Leo is instructed to remain fully aware of his position, living as someone without wealth and as the son of a baron. Leo experiences discrimination based on status firsthand, and this experience allows him to see with striking clarity just how foolish many people at the academy truly are. He feels a sense of embarrassment when he considers that the future of the Lionel kingdom rests on individuals of this caliber. Only now does he fully understand what his parents mean, because people like them are incapable of judging those beneath them with fairness or accuracy. Leo is certain that if his true identity were ever revealed, their attitudes would reverse completely, and they would immediately change their stance and gather around him without hesitation. He also notices that Whelmy and Arvine, along with their close associates, are gaining popularity among the students. Of everyone Leo has encountered, the two of them stand out as the most persistent in insulting others and the most skilled at spreading malicious rumors. Leo repeatedly observes Whelmy behaving intimately toward her sister's fiancé. Although he usually pays little attention to gossip, he has already heard numerous accounts describing the indecent nature of their behavior. Whelmy does appear beautiful, yet to Leo, that beauty seems to be the only thing she possesses. He has seen many people who take pride solely in their appearance, and at first, he comes to regard Whelmy as nothing more than an empty doll, lacking any real substance. At some point, Leo notices a female student in the same advanced class as himself who always looks unwell. He observes that she often watches others quietly from a distance. He soon realizes that this woman is Iora Ernest, the elder sister of Whelmy Ernest. Despite both of them being daughters of an earl, the treatment they receive is completely different. Leo hears that they are the same age and are half-sisters. From what he observes, he becomes convinced that Iora, as the daughter of the earl's first wife, is treated poorly within her own household. Leo finds himself wondering what Iora thinks about the relationship between her fiancé and her younger sister. When he considers approaching her, he quickly becomes aware that she, too, is subjected to discrimination. He understands that drawing closer to her would only create more trouble for her. He is surprised by his own concern over this matter, as it is something he never considers before coming to this academy. When he sets aside any prejudice related to her appearance, Leo notices that Iora moves with a posture that remains perfectly upright, almost gliding as she walks. To him, the beauty in the way she carries herself is remarkable, and her natural elegance rivals that of the royal family itself. Leo also observes that Iora's eyes are purple, a color that signifies extraordinary magical ability, which she deliberately keeps hidden. He realizes that Iora is just as beautiful as Whelmy, yet she chooses to conceal it beneath worn clothing and a visibly sorrowful demeanor. This contrast leaves Leo deeply curious, and he cannot help but wonder why Iora lives in such a manner, burdened by sadness despite her true nature. Leo attends a different class from Iora, and from the moment he enters the academy, he understands that skipping lessons is impossible without drawing attention to himself. Any attempt to stand out would only undermine the role he is meant to play. This restriction frustrates him deeply, as he finds himself wanting to speak with Iora more than he expects. When he later notices Iora sitting alone in the garden, He approaches her and asks for permission to sit beside her. Looking back, Leo realizes that following her 2 days later, just before lunchtime, is a reckless and unsettling choice on his part. At the time, however, he acts without fully considering how it might appear. Meanwhile, Iora grows confused by Leo's persistent gaze, sensing his attention even when he tries to restrain it. She suddenly acknowledges him as the crown prince, stating that she feels honored to be given the chance to speak with him. This catches Leo completely off guard. He is stunned that Iora recognizes his true identity so easily. He instinctively scans the surroundings and quickly realizes that no one else is present, aside from guards concealed by concealment spells. Iora apologizes immediately and questions whether she has been careless, explaining that she does not expect it to be an issue since she cannot sense anyone's mana nearby except that of the guards. Leo responds in a flustered and halting manner, insisting that he does not mind, though he remains genuinely shocked that Iora sees through his disguise. He questions whether there is any flaw in his appearance that gives him away. Iora responds with a gentle smile that causes Leo to flush, and in that moment, he becomes fully aware of how truly beautiful she is. Despite her exceptional qualities, Leo has never given Iora any particular thought until this encounter draws his attention so completely. Iora assures him that there is nothing wrong with his appearance and addresses him as Lord Metamo. Leo immediately asks her to use his real name instead. He explains that he is currently acting under the identity of a baron's son and acknowledges that Iora herself is the daughter of an earl. This causes Iora to panic, but Leo calmly explains that since she already sees through his disguise, she must understand that showing him excessive respect in this setting would only create complications for him. Although Leo drops subtle hints, he still cannot reveal himself publicly as the crown prince. Only those perceptive enough to realize the truth on their own, and wise enough to keep it secret, are permitted to know, as Iora does. Iora accepts this explanation without hesitation. Leo also makes it clear that he does not wish to be addressed as Lord at all. In response, Iora begins calling him only by his name. Hearing his name spoken that way, Leo finds Iora unexpectedly adorable. Iora then admits that the method by which she discovers his identity may be somewhat unfair. Curious, Leo asks what she means. Iora explains that Leo's disguise spell has no effect on her whatsoever. Leo reacts with shock and asks whether this means she can see his true appearance. Iora confirms this, emphasizing that she does not intend any disrespect. Leo points out that the Academy has rules stating that disrespectful behavior toward royalty is ignored. Iora responds that she is aware of this rule, but she believes that Leo's personal feelings would still be different. She then suggests, somewhat shyly, that this may be because her mana is stronger than his. Leo immediately understands, recalling that the same disguise spell fails to affect aids as well. He has never given it much thought before, since individuals with gold or silver eyes are known to possess enormous amounts of mana. Even so, such mana is insignificant when compared to those with purple eyes. It is recorded that people with purple eyes are capable of seeing through magic designed to deceive the senses. At present, the only person officially certified to possess purple eyes is Aids himself. Leo acknowledges that this must be the reason Iora can see through his disguise. Iora then asks how Leo knows that her eyes are purple. Leo explains that he notices her eyes when they pass each other in the corridor several days earlier, and to him, such eyes are exceedingly rare. He is surprised that there are not more rumors circulating about them. Iora explains that the Ernest family rarely interacts with their relatives, and she personally seldom leaves the house. She also recalls hearing her mother cast a spell to make her eyes appear blue while her mother is still alive. Now, Iora quietly wonders whether the effect of that spell is beginning to fade. Iora explains that the only person besides Leo who realizes her eyes are purple is her younger sister, Whelmy. To Leo, this fact alone seems as though it should cause a great uproar. From their outward appearances, it is already obvious that the two sisters receive very different treatment at home, even though Whelmy's red eyes are also extraordinary. At first, Leo assumes this is merely a common case of a younger sister acting arrogantly, irritated that the elder sister she looks down upon possesses a rarer trait, or perhaps the opposite. Driven by this assumption, Leo asks whether Iora is ostracized by her family and her sister because of her eyes. The question startles Iora, and Leo immediately feels he has crossed a line, prompting him to regret his lack of tact. Iora responds that her family's treatment of her has nothing to do with her eyes, and she does not believe that Whelmy is excluding her in any way. This answer surprises Leo. He then mentions that Whelmy behaves inappropriately with Iora's fiancé, only to realize once again that he has spoken too boldly. Despite repeatedly apologizing in his thoughts, Leo cannot understand why he feels such a strong desire to know more about Iora, to the point that questions continue to surface in his mind. Iora explains that Whelmy has her own reasons for acting as she does and asks Leo not to misunderstand her sister. From that moment, Leo decides that he needs to investigate the situation further. Leo becomes convinced that there is a deeper issue connecting Iora's underweight appearance and fragile health with Whelmy's pampered treatment and apparent success. He also feels a growing urge to help, even if only in a small way, should an opportunity arise. Wanting to understand Iora better, Leo asks to meet her again the following day. Iora is visibly pleased, as she has no friends, and this meeting marks the first time Leo finds himself drawn to a woman his own age. After that, Leo begins meeting Iora frequently, spending time talking with her about many subjects. He later tells aides that he enjoys discussing school life, magic, and family relationships with Iora. However, the more Leo speaks with her, the more his resentment toward the Ernest family grows. He even finds himself repeatedly contemplating how the Ernest family might be brought to ruin. Aides observes that Leo shows remarkable loyalty toward Iora, and teasingly remarks that the brother who has never shown interest in women appears to have finally reached puberty. Leo feels irritated by this remark and makes it clear that he does not want to hear such comments from aides. Leo responds with a strained smile, while aides continues with his sharp, openly misogynistic attitude. Aides states that he has no interest whatsoever in people who lack intelligence, and that he prefers women who are clever. Leo asks whether aides considers Whelmy intelligent. Aides affirms this without hesitation and counters with a question of his own, asking what Leo would do differently if he were in Whelmy's position and trying to save his sister. When Leo reflects on how Whelmy treats her family, Iora's fiancé, and Iora herself at school, aides concludes that Whelmy is always doing the best she can with the limited options available to her, even though she should rely on others more than she does. Leo wonders aloud whom Whelmy can truly trust, and speculates that she may place her trust in aides. He also feels that if Whelmy knows Leo is the crown prince, she could have chosen to seek his help directly. Aides then questions whether Leo has done anything at all to appear trustworthy in Whelmy's eyes, or even to express such an intention. Leo admits that he has done nothing of the sort. Aides responds by stating that anyone who reveals their hand without knowing whether the other party is an ally or an enemy is nothing more than an idiot. In this case, Aides is convinced that Whelmy has chosen him as an ally, and he regards that choice as an honor. Aides adds that Whelmy may never truly notice him, but he is confident that Leo has already handled Iora's situation in his own way. With that assumption, he asks Leo to explain exactly what he has done. As Leo listens, he realizes that Aides seems to have seen through everything from the very beginning. Leo explains that food becomes the first and most immediate problem, because Iora cannot go to the dining hall during lunchtime as Arvine and Whelmy are always there. On one occasion, Iora does try to enter the dining hall to eat, but Arvine notices her before she can even place an order and repeatedly compares her to Whelmy, leaving Iora unable to eat at all. After that incident, Iora limits her lunch to a single piece of bread brought from home. Leo believes that part of the reason for this situation is that Whelmy also tells Iora to stay away from Arvine. Because of this, Leo decides to take responsibility for Iora's meals himself. Leo normally eats in a private dining area, as his food must be tested in advance to ensure it contains no poison, and he invites Iora to eat there with him. This decision leads to arguments with the guards and the managers in charge, but Leo ultimately secures permission after directly confronting his father, although he never tells Iora about this confrontation. Even so, Iora eats very little, which Leo assumes is the result of having lived like this for a long time. Compared to when Leo first meets her, however, Iora gradually begins to look healthier. Leo also comes to understand why Iora's clothes appear so dull. To avoid the risk of her mother's spell influence slipping away, Leo establishes this salon under the pretext of research. The salon is located within a hidden chamber designed as an emergency escape route for the royal family. If Iora's purple eyes were ever revealed, Leo knows it would cause a significant disturbance in many ways. Within this space, Iora analyzes Leo's transformation ring and constructs a similar spell. Afterward, Leo and Iora invite only those they consider trustworthy into the library connected to the salon. The first person invited is Carla, chosen directly by Whelmy. After her come a certain duchess, a girl selected by the saint, several noble children, and Leo's younger sister, who enters the academy later than the others. Everyone approaches Leo with extreme politeness, with the sole exception of his younger sister. Once Leo's disguise is revealed, he and Iora also technically include Whelmy among those invited. Leo reasons that if Whelmy deliberately distances herself from the gathering, then she can be considered trustworthy. Leo admits that he still does not know how much Whelmy truly understands about the situation, but if she continues to see him as a coward even now, then he believes it is highly likely that she has not grasped the truth at all. Only within the salon does Iora begin to dress elegantly and gradually show her bright smile. As the plan nears its later stages, Iora's hair and skin start to shine so vividly that concealing them becomes difficult, forcing her to hide her hair using a transformation spell. Leo carefully keeps everything hidden at Iora's request, justified by her claim that Whelmy is in trouble and that she wants to save her sister from their family. The person Leo truly intends to save is Iora, not Whelmy. At the graduation party, Arvine is set to annul his engagement with Iora. Leo reveals that it is Whelmy who informs Iora that Arvine is planning to become engaged to her instead. This leads Leo to consider the possibility that they intend to fabricate a mutual justification for canceling the engagement with Iora. Leo believes this is likely, as Iora plans to follow every part of Whelmy's plan, even though it causes her pain. He also explains that Iora does not object if Whelmy chooses to sacrifice herself to save her, deciding that she only needs to endure the pain on her own. When Iora expresses this resolve, Leo finds himself with no choice but to yield. If Iora loves Whelmy that deeply, then Leo decides that he will save Whelmy as well, just as he has sworn to do, because that promise includes the people Iora loves. Leo becomes almost convinced that the true Whelmy is exactly as Iora describes her. Even if Whelmy is not an enemy, the fact that she is also trying to save Iora in the same way Leo is means that she qualifies as an ally. Still, Leo and Whelmy are rivals when it comes to Iora, and Whelmy's openly hostile attitude leaves Leo dissatisfied. Because of that, Leo refuses to trust her intentions until he sees with his own eyes that Whelmy genuinely wants to save Iora. Leo resolves that he will take the central role in saving Iora. He believes that he himself is not the one most deserving of Iora's gratitude. Instead, he feels that Whelmy deserves it more, as Whelmy has protected Iora since childhood, far longer than Leo ever has. Aides, for his part, decides to remain in the shadows until the very end. When the possibility arises that Iora might actually want Leo to be the one who saves her, Leo dismisses the idea, believing that he understands Iora far better than Aides does. Although this stance offends Aides, Leo remains firm. He believes that Iora has already made an effort to respond to his feelings, and because of that, he does not mind relinquishing the victory to Whelmy. For Leo, simply obtaining Iora's love is already enough. It has been a full month since Whelmy begins living in the second residence of Marquis Ormeridge, and this moment becomes the very first time Iora comes to visit her there. When Iora arrives, Whelmy immediately notices that Iora now appears more beautiful than before. There is a distinct radiance about her. She shines effortlessly when wearing an elegant gown at the evening banquet, and she is just as captivating in her daily appearance, which carries a mature, neat, and well-organized impression. After Iora is temporarily acknowledged as a countess, she returns to the Ernest residence. Even so, Whelmy does not truly wish for Iora to go back there, because only two servants in that residence can genuinely be trusted, namely Uria and Gordley. In the end, Whelmy agrees only after every other servant is dismissed, leaving those two behind. Following that decision, Leo brings in servants from his own residence along with two highly competent secretaries. An inspector is also dispatched by Leo to assist in overseeing the administration of the territory. Whelmy carefully conceals the fact that 80% of her hesitation comes from a personal desire to remain together with Iora for as long as possible. While Iora is gently combing Whelmy's hair, she seeks Whelmy's thoughts regarding life in the Marquis Ormeridge residence. In response, Whelmy's face turns red almost immediately. Over the past month, Whelmy is thoroughly indulged by Aides in every aspect of her daily life. Even so, she is not permitted to leave the house, as Aides considers the timing to be inappropriate. Except for the hours when Aides is occupied with work, Whelmy remains constantly by his side. Each morning, Aids holds Whelmy tightly as she wakes and places a kiss on her. After that, Aids personally prepares breakfast and dessert for her, and then the servants assist Whelmy by cleansing her body and dressing her carefully. Once this routine is complete, Whelmy receives proper instruction befitting a respectable noblewoman, learning every necessary manner and conduct expected within the household. She approaches these lessons willingly and studies them with genuine enthusiasm. After lunch, Whelmy takes an afternoon nap. When she wakes, snacks are already prepared for her, and she spends her time however she wishes until night falls. During these hours, Aids may be attending matters at the Ministry of Magic or remaining secluded within his office. However, once his work is finished, Aids always returns to embrace Whelmy. He seats her upon his lap and shows her an abundance of physical affection. At dinner, Aids provides guidance on proper dining etiquette, ensuring she learns each rule correctly. Later, after bathing and changing into her nightwear, Whelmy joins Aids for drinks after dinner and spends time playing several board games with him. Eventually, Whelmy falls asleep while Aids gently strokes her hair. Because Whelmy does not possess the right to refuse, whenever she grows embarrassed or acts stubborn, Aids reminds her that she must do whatever he tells her to do. These words become his habitual refrain, and Aids appears consistently pleased as he says them. Whelmy feels that rather than expressing genuine love, Aids is merely toying with her, and this thought occupies her mind repeatedly. She believes that Aids is forcing her into many humiliating situations, especially when he makes her kiss him. Recently, Aids even orders Whelmy to sit with him while he works in his office. He assigns her several tasks, yet during breaks he calls her adorable, claims to feel refreshed when seeing her handwriting, gives her a grade of B because of her stubborn disposition, and then punishes her accordingly. At every opportunity he finds, Aids offers compliments that inevitably make Whelmy burst into loud laughter. When Iora calls out to her, Whelmy responds by stating that she feels uncomfortable. Iora, in turn, observes that Whelmy seems content in this place. Whelmy immediately denies this impression, reiterating that she has just said she feels uncomfortable. Iora acknowledges that she hears her clearly and continues to watch Whelmy closely, paying careful attention to her state and expressions. Whelmy senses that Iora wears an expression as if she understands everything, and this alone feels deeply embarrassing to Whelmy. Even so, Aids never does anything that Whelmy truly dislikes. Whelmy feels so happy that the intensity of that happiness becomes frightening, and the same feeling applies to her current situation. When Whelmy hears that Iora is coming to visit today, she feels a trace of fear despite eagerly anticipating the visit. After the banquet that took place back then, Whelmy and Iora openly reveal their feelings to each other, yet many years have passed since they last speak to one another properly. Still, Iora does not change at all. She remains just as graceful as she is when they are children. In the past, Whelmy and Iora often hold hands and play together, and Iora willingly takes care of Whelmy without hesitation. Iora also never appears exhausted even when overwhelmed by work, while Whelmy alone remains dishonest with herself. Eventually, Whelmy brings up the subject of Leo and asks about what Iora appreciates in him. Both Aids and Iora previously make it clear how much Leo has done for Iora. Whelmy already knows most of this, yet she wishes to hear it directly from Iora herself. For Iora, however, this becomes a difficult matter to put into words. Whelmy insists that there is nothing good about Leo at all, but that is not what Iora means. Instead, Iora likes everything about Leo, leaving Whelmy completely silent. Iora explains that Leo is fair, diligent, and kind-hearted, and beyond that, he becomes especially amusing when he behaves in a childish manner. Whelmy wonders whether such traits can truly describe a grown man, and Iora affirms that they can. Iora also feels that certain aspects of Leo resemble Whelmy, describing him as intelligent yet somewhat spoiled. This comparison irritates Whelmy, and she demands that Iora not equate her with Leo. Iora clarifies that she does not mean that Whelmy and Leo are exactly the same. In Iora's view, both of them are fair and kind, though they possess a slightly childish side. Back during their school days, Leo asks Whelmy whether she plans to visit the salon, mentioning that Iora will also be there. This happens during a period when Iora's mood has already begun to change. Whelmy questions Leo's reason for inviting her, and Leo explains that Arvine is not invited. Whelmy then wonders why she should go to a place filled with people who make her uncomfortable, and she ultimately refuses the invitation. At that time, however, Whelmy is convinced that Leo is attempting to reconnect her with Iora. In truth, Leo already knows that there is no conflict between Iora and Whelmy, yet Whelmy forces herself not to dwell on how Leo comes to know this. Whelmy wants to reduce the chances of Arvine and Iora encountering each other, even though Leo is already aware of her intentions. She is even afraid to imagine Iora discovering Whelmy's true purpose, because if Iora does not hate her or feel offended, Iora would instead worry about Whelmy after Whelmy's death. In reality, Whelmy wishes to leave, and she pretends not to notice Leo's kindness in extending the invitation. When Iora asks why Whelmy harbors resentment toward Leo, Whelmy falls silent for a moment. The Whelmy of not long ago might gain nothing at all, yet AIDS gradually reveals Whelmy's beauty little by little, indulging her and teaching her that there is happiness in relying on someone else and in expressing her true feelings. In the end, Whelmy answers that she does not want Leo to take Iora away. Deep down, Whelmy believes that if AIDS continues to maintain Iora as his fiancée, it must be for personal interests rather than affection. Whelmy is convinced that Leo's feelings toward Iora do not stem from personal gain at all. She believes this firmly, judging from the way Leo looks straight into people's hearts without ever expecting anything in return. Because of that sincerity, Whelmy is certain that Leo will eventually win Iora's heart, and that certainty is precisely why Whelmy harbors resentment toward him. As these thoughts overwhelm her, tears begin to fall, prompting Iora to embrace Whelmy gently from behind. Iora conveys that Leo expresses similar sentiments, yet Whelmy insists that she should not be compared to him. Iora then shares that Leo once tells her that he is no match for Whelmy. To Iora, both Leo and Whelmy hold an irreplaceable place in her heart, and Whelmy will always remain precious to her no matter what happens. This makes Whelmy curious, and she feels an urge to ask something she has long kept buried in her heart. She questions Iora about the impression she has when they meet for the very first time, even though Whelmy knows this is something she should never have asked. After Iora's mother passes away, Iora's stepmother and stepsister, who is the same age as Iora, move into Iora's home almost immediately. To Whelmy, this serves as undeniable proof of Saverin's betrayal toward Iora's mother, making it impossible to imagine that Iora does not think about this painful reality at the time. Contrary to Whelmy's fears, Iora recalls thinking that Whelmy is an exceptionally beautiful girl. Iora explains that she feels nervous before meeting Whelmy, even while still grieving over the betrayal committed by Saverin against her mother. Iora also brings up how, upon meeting Whelmy, her eyes shine brightly when she looks at Iora. At that moment, Whelmy herself sees Iora as an extraordinarily beautiful girl, as lovely and radiant as a princess. From the very beginning, Whelmy already regards Iora as an older sister. She knows instinctively that she and Iora will become close, and that closeness is exactly what Whelmy hopes for. Iora expresses that even though she and Whelmy are not related by blood, she still considers Whelmy to be her beloved younger sister. Iora then pulls Whelmy into a tight embrace, and Whelmy is moved to tears, deeply touched because she believes every word Iora conveys. To Iora, there are countless things that Whelmy has done for her, far more than Whelmy will ever realize or acknowledge on her own. Iora gently strokes Whelmy's hair. She feels that she has lived in despair ever since losing her mother, believing that this loss forces her to grow more mature than other children of her age. However, Iora never truly feels pleased when people tell her that she is wiser than her years, because such wisdom comes from being compelled to grow up faster than anyone else. Her mother understands that her own life will not last much longer, and it is Whelmy who restores Iora's sense of calm, her cheerfulness, and her remaining innocence. With reddened eyes filled with curiosity and platinum blonde hair glowing softly beneath the sunlight, Whelmy clasps Iora's hand. Whelmy looks genuinely happy as she expresses that Iora is her beautiful older sister, someone admirable and kinder than anyone else in the world. Iora knows deeply that Whelmy cherishes her with all her heart. To Iora, Whelmy appears like an angelic girl. Although Iora carries profound sadness over her mother's death, the sole reason her heart does not completely shatter is because Whelmy always stays by her side. What truly devastates Iora is not being able to remain close to Whelmy anymore. When the people who call themselves the parents of Iora and Whelmy steal Iora's mother's necklace and give it to Whelmy, Iora feels overwhelming sorrow. Even more than the loss itself, Iora worries about the shock on Whelmy's face and the wounds that such an ordeal inevitably leaves in Whelmy's gentle heart. Iora makes it clear to Whelmy that she understands Whelmy's feelings all too well, and that realization causes Iora deep pain. Iora's heart aches whenever she sees the sadness in Whelmy's eyes, especially when Whelmy offers harsh advice while wearing an innocent expression, doing so every time she tries to act for Iora's sake. Iora wishes that Whelmy does not need to go so far, because Iora believes she herself is fine. The harder Whelmy tries, the more skillful she becomes at wearing that mask. The fact that Iora can no longer see Whelmy's pure, unguarded smile becomes the most heartbreaking reality for her. This pain surpasses hunger when Iora is forbidden to eat, exceeds the suffering of being struck for making mistakes, and even outweighs the moment when Iora realizes that Saverin is plotting her death. Nothing hurts Iora more than being unable to see Whelmy smile anymore. After that, there are only 2 occasions when Iora manages to see Whelmy's cheerful smile again: when Arvine cancels his engagement with Iora, and when Iora departs for Aides' residence. Iora must save herself, even though she cannot save Whelmy. She understands that this decision is necessary, yet it feels as though her chest is being torn apart. Iora accepts it because she knows this is Whelmy's greatest wish, but if circumstances are different, Iora would never leave Whelmy's side, even for a single second. At that time, Iora initially plans to make use of Leo. She wonders what kind of expression Whelmy would show if she were to say this aloud. When Iora meets Leo in the back garden, she deliberately attempts to surprise him and capture his interest. Her intention is to convince Leo to fall in love with Whelmy and to separate Whelmy from Arvine, or at the very least to gain Leo's sympathy. In doing so, Leo would help Iora restore her appearance to what it once is, and afterward assist in separating Whelmy from Arvine once Arvine becomes aware of Iora's renewed presence. It eventually becomes clear to Iora that Whelmy has indeed used her charm on that unpleasant man for Iora's sake. Iora realizes that she cannot allow Whelmy alone to resort to such underhanded tactics, and she resolves that she too must act. Iora then comes to realize that she can never employ such tactics herself, because unlike Arvine, Leo looks directly at her without avoidance. He does not merely meet Iora's violet eyes. He perceives Iora's true self that exists behind the mask forcibly placed upon her by Whelmy in an attempt to protect her. Leo proves to be a person with a pure heart, much like Whelmy herself. He even extends his hand to offer Iora his help. Iora feels her own weakness clearly, fearing that if Leo is taken advantage of and Whelmy becomes aware of it, Whelmy would be saddened and disappointed in her. She worries whether she is truly doing the right thing if her choices cause any delay in saving Whelmy, even though she believes she is doing everything she possibly can for Whelmy's sake. In truth, Iora does not believe she possesses the talent or virtue that others so often praise her for. In her eyes, Whelmy has always been far superior, someone who does everything within her power to save others out of deep and genuine love. For that very reason, Iora realizes that she needs Leo's assistance in order to save Whelmy. Although she has already made this request to Leo and to others, acting immediately proves to be difficult. Iora is even unable to respond to Leo's affection when he confesses it to her. While Iora feels drawn to Leo, she cannot bring herself to feel happy as long as Whelmy remains trapped in sorrow. Because of this, Iora decides to follow the course laid out by Whelmy's own plan. She knows that Whelmy becomes captivated by Aides on the day of the debutante banquet. Iora is convinced that Whelmy will try to make Iora leave together with Aides. If Aides is the person Whelmy chooses to entrust with Iora's safety, then Aides must be the one most capable of loving Whelmy, and likewise the one whom Whelmy can love most deeply in return. With that conviction, Iora tells Whelmy that she comes to the decision that Whelmy will find happiness beside Aides. Everything stems from Iora's love for Whelmy, a love that mirrors Whelmy's love for her. Iora and Whelmy then look at each other with profound affection, and their shared gaze naturally turns into soft smiles filled with emotion. Iora feels overwhelming joy that this day finally arrives, a day when she and Whelmy are able to smile together like this once more. After Aides returns to the residence, Iora prepares to depart and return home. Whelmy sees her off, offering farewell wishes and hoping that both Iora and Leo will find happiness together. Iora then wonders whether Whelmy herself has found happiness now. Whelmy's gaze shifts toward Aides, and she grows shy as she looks at him. At that moment, Iora becomes certain that Whelmy will be all right. Aides accomplishes something that Iora herself can never achieve. He tears away Whelmy's mask and, in an instant, treats Whelmy's true self with genuine love. Iora praises Whelmy for her keen judgment of character and feels deeply relieved that Whelmy is able to find someone who will truly care for her and protect her properly. Soon after, Leo steps out of the horse-drawn carriage to escort Iora, marking the end of their meeting with quiet reassurance and hope. Iora suddenly runs toward Leo and wraps her arms around him, catching him completely off guard. In that moment, she remembers Whelmy once saying that Iora will always be the older sister she is proud of. Overcome by emotion, Iora begins to cry, prompting Leo to react in concern as he senses that something significant has happened. Iora then explains that Whelmy has given her approval for Iora and Leo to be together. The revelation shocks Leo, who struggles to believe it at first. Iora follows this by apologizing for making Leo wait for such a long time. From Leo's perspective, the passage of 4 years is insignificant, yet to Iora it feels like an incredibly long stretch of time, and she expresses deep gratitude toward him for enduring it. Iora proceeds to tell Leo everything. She explains that she wants to wait until Whelmy is able to feel truly happy, provided that Leo is willing to do the same, and she acknowledges that Leo ultimately keeps that promise. Iora then admits that even though His Excellency gives his approval, she anticipates that many people will claim she is not suitable for Leo. She is not only the daughter of a former earl, who later becomes a countess from a fallen family, but she also carries emotional scars from a failed engagement in the past. As a result of the discussion between His Excellency and Leo, Iora expects many voices to argue that she is not worthy of the crown prince. Leo responds by questioning whether Iora intends to give up, making it clear that he himself has no intention of doing so. Iora agrees with him, and this is precisely why she is considering accepting Aides' invitation. Aides fulfills the conditions required for Iora to be admitted into the International Magic Research Institute, an institution for which he is the largest financial donor. The Magic Association is also promoting the latest advancements in magic, and Aides keeps the promises he makes to Iora. In addition, Aides provides Iora with a place where she can make the most of her limited talents. If Iora achieves notable results there, she will be awarded a high-level international magic certification. Leo points out that such a qualification represents the second highest rank, surpassed only by the supreme ruler of magic. Iora also hears that if her performance is exceptional enough, she may even be adopted by a family ranked higher than a marquis. If that does not occur, the Ormridge family is prepared to accept her regardless. Leo wonders whether all of this will require a great deal of time. In response, Iora explains that her graduation thesis on reducing magical burden has already been proven to be her own work and appears to have received approval. She believes that by applying this thesis along with what she has already tested at the salon, she should be able to achieve practical results in a relatively short period. Everyone who participates in the salon at the Noble Academy is remarkably talented, and through their productive discussions, Iora gains access to many unpublished ideas she never would have considered on her own, with illusion techniques being one such example. The people who provide Iora with that space and opportunity are Leo and Whelmy themselves. Iora states sincerely that she can never fully repay the gratitude she feels toward both of them. Regarding production and distribution, Iora believes the process will proceed smoothly through cooperation with Marquis Ormridge and the Carla family. At this point, the only remaining concern is whether everyone will agree to allocate a portion of the intellectual property rights to the royal family. Leo finds it difficult to imagine anyone from the salon attempting to claim those privileges, especially since Iora is the one who initiates all of these projects. Iora, however, remains uncertain. Leo admits that he does not truly know, as his father habitually takes credit for everything Leo accomplishes. Iora is often told by those close to her that she has low self-esteem, yet she has never fully agreed with that assessment. Leo reassures Iora that she does not need to worry, emphasizing that she is free to do whatever she wishes, while it is Leo's role to handle the things she cannot do herself. He suggests that they make use of their influence and power while they are able to do so. Leo then smiles, and that simple expression brings genuine happiness to Iora, prompting her to rest her head against his shoulder. In that quiet moment, Iora is convinced that Leo does not truly understand, just as Whelmy does not. Iora feels that Leo has no idea how profoundly he has already saved her. Today, the mage Clartz arrives in order to prepare official documents declaring that Whelmy is his biological child. When Clartz first sees Whelmy, He is taken aback by her refined and graceful appearance. Aides openly admits that this sight is somewhat unexpected even for him. Clartz remarks that Whelmie's etiquette has improved remarkably, although he has always regarded her as a polite and well-mannered girl from the beginning. It has been a month and a half since Whelmie begins her studies as the wife of a marquis, and she receives the highest evaluations from the household servants throughout that period. Whelmie explains that the tutor who has taught both her and Iora since their childhood is Countess Calwella Dresta. Clartz then confirms whether this refers to Lady Calwella, who once trained the current queen when she is still the crown princess, and Whelmie affirms this. The name Dresta is bestowed only upon women who excel both as noble ladies and as instructors. Although Lady Calwella never marries, the reigning queen grants her the title and rank of countess as a mark of respect and recognition. Whelmie also recalls that she mentions this matter previously when Iora comes to visit. Since arriving at the marquis's residence, Whelmie is rarely reprimanded for her studies or for mistakes in etiquette. However, she notes that her highest ranking at the Noble Academy is largely due to the quality of the reports prepared by Iora. Iora insists that this is not the sole reason for Whelmie's outstanding results, pointing out that Whelmie never struggles with etiquette, writing, or magic. Whelmie reflects that whenever such praise is mentioned, she grows curious about how others truly feel, admitting that she tends to surround herself only with foolish people. This remark causes Iora to laugh. From Iora's perspective, Lady Calwella is an extraordinary woman. Iora's mother is once quite close to her, and Iora hears that this friendship is precisely why Calwella agrees to teach both Iora and Whelmie. Whelmie explains that Calwella's agreement is not for Whelmie's sake, but for Iora's. Normally, the internal affairs of another family are difficult to discern without direct inquiry. In the past, Iora's mother tells Calwella that she looks forward to her assistance once Iora comes of age. Having already promised Iora's mother, Calwella applies to become the instructor of both girls at a fee far below the value of her abilities. Even though Calwella is aware that Earl Saverin takes his mistress as a second wife and brings her daughter into the household, she never imagines that the girl is the same age as Iora. At that time, Iora herself is isolated in a separate residence. Despite their close friendship, Calwella remains extremely busy serving as a tutor to the royal family and other high-ranking noble houses. After Iora's late mother withdraws from high society to remain at her sickbed, Calwella never has the opportunity to properly meet Iora. Whelmie explains that Lady Calwella appears to harbor certain suspicions, not regarding Whelmie's abilities, but concerning Whelmie's eye color and appearance, which do not resemble either Iora's mother or Saverin. When Clartz asks what happens afterward, Whelmie continues by explaining that Calwella provides the same instruction to Iora and Whelmie that she once gives to the crown princess. Calwella holds the belief that in matters of etiquette, one can never be too refined or too knowledgeable. For Whelmie, this becomes Lady Calwella's favorite saying. Whelmie believes that Calwella wishes to ensure that Iora is never mocked for growing up without a mother, even though Calwella herself is undeniably strict. Assuming that Calwella intends to provide Iora with the same level of education, Whelmie arranges for Calwella to be demoted in rank so that she can be stationed at Iora's dormitory. When Clartz asks how old Whelmie is when she conceives and carries out such a plan, Whelmie answers that she is 12 at the time. Aides laughs upon hearing this, while Clartz can only react with amazement. Aides comments that such behavior is not surprising, as Whelmie is capable of accomplishing these things with ease. Whelmie adds that Calwella's suspicions fade after her demotion, and after she is able to speak directly with Iora. Through this, Calwella finally comes to understand the true circumstances within the Ernest household. Whelmie observes that Iora is deeply frustrated by the way she is treated, but in exchange for maintaining secrecy, Calwella is able to teach Iora a form of etiquette that Iora would otherwise never accept. It is precisely this refined etiquette that later draws Leo's attention. To Whelmie, people never truly know which aspects of life will ultimately prove fortunate, but at least one of her choices turns out not to be a mistake. Clartz acknowledges that Whelmie accomplishes these things with ease and admits that he cannot deny it. Aides adds that Whelmie even meets Clartz's own strict expectations. Aides then sets down his cup and states that he has urgent matters to attend to. Whelmie remarks that it is already late, but Aides assures her that he will return that very night. He asks Clartz to prepare the documents in the meantime, as that is the reason for Clartz's visit. Clartz proceeds to finalize and sign the documents, declaring that Whelmy is now officially recognized as his daughter. Whelmy expresses her gratitude to Clartz and addresses him as her father. Clartz responds by explaining that he has always regarded Aids as a younger brother, and he is sincerely pleased that Aids and Whelmy decide to marry. Clartz then adds that although he is certain Aids will not disclose certain matters, he wishes to provide Whelmy with a clearer understanding of Aids himself. He asks whether Whelmy is aware that Savrin and Arvine have already been punished for their crimes, and Whelmy confirms this. Clartz explains that Savrin is executed by hanging, while the woman who is left with nothing but her noble title is exiled to a remote convent, marking the final outcome of their actions. Savrin's punishment is appropriate, not only because he mismanages his household, but also because he attempts to murder his brother's daughter, the rightful heir. However, Whelmy does not feel the same certainty regarding her mother's punishment. Even though her mother's noble title is only stripped away, there is no possibility for her to avoid exile from the capital. To Whelmy, being forced to live in the countryside as a commoner or being sent away to a convent are both severe punishments. Clartz agrees with this view and admits that he also wishes Whelmy's mother is not stripped of her rank, as she is someone he holds dear. Whelmy adds that her mother is always kind to her and to the servants. When Clartz seeks confirmation, Whelmy explains that the only person her mother treats with strange hostility is Iora. All the servants, except for Aria and Gordley, behave coldly toward Iora. Whelmy suspects this happens because the servants admire her mother as the lady of the house. Whelmy reflects that her mother despises poverty, likely because she grows up in an orphanage. As a reaction to the hardships she once faces, her mother develops a habit of excessive spending. She always insists that Whelmy wear fine clothes and repeatedly reassures her that money is not something she needs to worry about, encouraging Whelmy to buy as many things as she wishes. This convinces Whelmy that her mother does not want her to grow up in poverty. Whelmy also suspects that this may be the reason her mother harbors resentment toward Iora, who is born into a noble family and never lacks anything in life. Even if this explanation holds some truth, Whelmy feels no sympathy for her mother. Regardless of the reasons behind her actions, the undeniable fact remains that her mother commits acts of violence against Iora, and for that reason alone, Whelmy refuses to regard someone like that as family. Whelmy then turns her thoughts to Arvine and questions whether his punishment consists only of a fine. Clartz confirms this, explaining that His Excellency does not wish to pursue severe punishment for Arvine's disrespectful conduct. Clartz points out that if Arvine is exiled or executed while Whelmy remains unpunished, malicious rumors would spread uncontrollably. He also notes that the Schneeger family itself commits no wrongdoing. While the second son clearly possesses a flawed character, both the father and the elder brother are fundamentally good people. To Whelmy, this assessment is a sharp and accurate criticism of Arvine, and Clartz agrees with that interpretation. Clartz admits that he feels the same resentment toward Isabella, as she is one of the primary sources of suffering for both Whelmy and Iora. For women, having their bodies touched against their will is far more painful than cruel gossip or malicious ridicule. Whelmy acknowledges that she willingly uses her own body as part of her plan. Clartz responds that even so, had he known about the situation surrounding Whelmy and Iora from the beginning, he would have immediately intervened, provided information, and perhaps been able to protect Whelmy as her father. Whelmy asks Clartz not to let such thoughts trouble him, emphasizing that the responsibility never belongs to him. Even if Clartz has the intention to help, Whelmy makes the decision not to accept it, knowing that Clartz has no means to save Iora. In the end, there is only one way to save both Iora and Whelmy. Leo, Clartz, Iora, Whelmy, and many others are connected through different paths and circumstances, yet at the core of it all lies Whelmy's letter of complaint to Aids, which allows those connections to form in the first place. Clartz explains that Arvine's ultimate fate will be decided by his family once he is sent away, even though Aids has already met with him and imposed an additional and severe punishment. Clartz reassures Whelmy that she does not need to worry any longer, as Arvine will never trouble either her or Iora again. Whelmy reflects that, judging from Arvine's personality, she doubts he will even be able to attend social gatherings, as his excessive arrogance in the past makes such a recovery unlikely. Clartz then remarks that Aids has likely never spoken about certain matters himself, which is why Clartz wishes to speak briefly with Whelmy about Aids. This revelation surprises Whelmy, as she realizes Clartz is about to share something deeply personal about him. Clartz considers it a kind of secret, though not a true weakness, at least not in his own eyes. Whelmy grows curious and urges him to continue. Clartz goes on to explain that AIDS rises to the position of head of the Ministry of Magic and becomes extremely strict regarding the misuse of magical artifacts. This uncompromising stance is rooted in personal loss, as AIDS loses both his mother and his older sister due to such misuse, more precisely, his stepmother and stepsister. Clartz adds that it is widely known that AIDS enforces harsh measures against cursed magical items, works to uncover the fundamental principles behind them, and ensures that such knowledge is disseminated broadly. Although AIDS never publicly reveals his true lineage, the truth is that he is the son of the younger brother of the late Marquis. Whelmy realizes that this is the first time she has ever heard such information. Clartz explains that almost no one knows this fact, with only a handful of people aware of it, including very few individuals at the highest levels of the state. AIDS' father plays a crucial role in assisting the Marquis with the administration of the territory. He ultimately loses his life after being caught in a landslide caused by an earthquake while conducting an inspection. At that time, his wife is pregnant, and the child she later gives birth to has violet-colored eyes. The resemblance to Iora's circumstances is unmistakable, forming yet another quiet parallel that binds their fates together. The Marquis asks the young widow a direct question and offers her a choice. She may take the child with her and raise him herself, or she may pretend the child never exists and remarry into another family as a second wife. Whelmy assumes that her mother chooses the second option. Not long afterward, her mother leaves AIDS behind and marries again, which becomes the reason the former Marquis takes custody of him. Whelmy wonders why such a decision is made, but Clartz explains that only the person who makes that choice truly knows the answer. Clartz recounts that, in the end, the previous Marquis officially acknowledges AIDS as his own son. After recognizing AIDS' exceptional talent, he appoints him as his successor shortly before his daughter reaches adulthood. Clartz does not know what the daughter truly feels at that time, because the original plan is for her to marry first and then assume the responsibilities of the Marquis. At the very least, she forces herself to smile and accepts that trying to change the situation is futile, as an older sister whose rights are taken by a much younger brother, and as a woman whose own child is once stripped of the position that should have been his. Whelmy believes that such people must harbor dark thoughts and unspoken emotions deep in their hearts. Clartz says that, as far as he knows, the three of them appear to get along well, even if that harmony exists only on the surface. Still, he believes that if they hold any feelings about the matter, those feelings remain relatively restrained. All three receive a first-class noble education, and the Marquis is not a cruel man, even if he is strict. He loves his wife and daughter, as well as his nephew-turned-son. Whelmy concludes that cursed magical objects are what ruin everything. At some point, someone secretly places magical tools that amplify negative emotions inside the rooms of the Marquis's wife and daughter. Clartz admits that he only later learns how busy the former Marquis is. After losing his younger brother and his right-hand man, he no longer spends much time at home, and as a result, he realizes the gradual changes in his wife and daughter far too late. By then, AIDS is already being abused in various ways. At first, it takes the form of mild mistreatment, such as being ignored, and AIDS himself cannot understand why they suddenly begin to hate him. One day, when AIDS points out an error in a magical technique under discussion, their suppressed resentment erupts into open rage. The cursed magical tools act like emotional bombs. The Leroud family has interacted with the Marquis's household before, but they have never entered such private spaces. In that moment, the Marquis's wife and daughter confront AIDS while crying and shouting in fury. Driven by that madness, AIDS' deranged older sister attacks him with a knife, while his stepmother approaches him with a heated poker. Realizing the immediate danger, AIDS uses magic to knock the weapons from their hands. The poker falls to the floor, and the room is instantly engulfed in roaring flames. The former Marquis's collection of fine liquors is knocked over, shatters, and ignites. In mere moments, the fire spreads to the women's dresses, and they are quickly consumed by the blaze. Even so, AIDS is powerless to stop them as they cling to him, and the room turns into a raging inferno. A government official arrives to investigate the disturbance and immediately pulls AIDS to safety. Clartz explains that AIDS always wears gloves in public because his hands bear burned scars from where his stepmother once grabbed him. After the chaos subsides, Clark speaks with AIDS. Although the incident is undeniably a scandal, the two women who caused the fire die, so the truth is concealed, and the event is reported to the public as an accidental fire that is not extinguished in time. In the end, the identity of the person who hides the cursed items in their rooms is never discovered. AIDS does not hate the women themselves. Instead, he comes to hate cursed magical objects from the depths of his heart. He once explains that his stepmother and stepsister are originally kind people. Even if they truly come to hate him, they are not the type to express such feelings openly. After that tragedy, AIDS, who is always outstanding, begins to distance himself from women and devotes even more of his time to study and the pursuit of magical knowledge. Whelmy assumes that Clark already knows what follows. However, Clark admits that he does not know much about what happens to AIDS after he leaves the only household he has ever known. From that point on, Clark begins visiting care institutions to gain practical experience in curse removal. At the same time, the reigning king introduces new regulations, and the accident leaves many kinds of scars behind. Still, Clark is not present during the darkest period of AIDS' life. Whelmy wonders if this is the reason Clark teaches her how to remove curses. Clark affirms this, and adds that he believes it is the same reason AIDS helps both Whelmy and Iora. Clark reflects that if he realizes the truth earlier, if he asks more questions, and if AIDS seeks his help, then perhaps they might have been saved. In the case of the Ernest family incident, Gordley is the one who becomes aware of the presence of the magical objects. At that time, Whelmy also wants to save Iora, and that is why she goes to a mage and writes the letter to AIDS. Clark explains that saving the lives of Whelmy and Iora is not an act of atonement for those who have died. Rather, it is a form of self-indulgent habit born from regret. Because of that regret, AIDS becomes the head of the Ministry of Magic, while Clark himself chooses to help as many people as possible as a curse breaker, hoping that tragedies like the ones that befall them will happen less often in the future. Clark adds that this is also the reason Whelmy chooses what she believes to be the best course of action. He explains that Whelmy has once been placed in a situation similar to AIDS's and struggles through it in her own way. He believes that AIDS is drawn to this, and to Whelmy herself, as someone who tries to reach what AIDS cannot achieve on his own. This becomes the reason AIDS takes an interest in Whelmy and offers her his help. Clark is convinced that the love AIDS holds for Whelmy is genuine, regardless of his demeanor. Since the loss of his mother and sister, Clark has never seen AIDS as happy as he is when he is with Whelmy. In Clark's view, Whelmy's actions save AIDS' heart. Whelmy begins to question what kind of feelings this truly is. She reflects on AIDS, who constantly teases her, who suddenly looks at her with unexpected gentleness, who always holds her with affection and softly strokes her head. Even when Whelmy acts dishonestly, AIDS continues to smile with quiet happiness, especially when Whelmy does her best to express her affection toward him. Beside Whelmy, AIDS is never a misogynistic, cruel, or indifferent ruler of magic. Whelmy is not entirely certain whether she truly saves AIDS' heart, but if she unknowingly becomes someone useful to a man who always seems so perfect, someone who sees her true intentions and showers her with love, then she feels content. When Whelmy realizes that she is not merely taking without giving anything in return, as she once believes, she feels genuine joy. She then expresses her gratitude to Clark, whom she now acknowledges as her father. Clark hopes that Whelmy will also give all of her love to AIDS, because AIDS has lost so many people who once loved him. Clark believes that the former Marquis is likely too busy to give AIDS sufficient attention in the past, and for that reason, he wishes Whelmy to return as much affection as AIDS has given her. Whelmy accepts Clark's words and resolves to follow them. After some time passes, AIDS returns and inquires about Clark's departure. Whelmy remains silent at first, then suddenly runs to AIDS and embraces him, prompting his confusion. Whelmy conveys her love for AIDS. In response, AIDS holds Whelmy and assumes that Clark has shared some unnecessary matters with her. Whelmy believes those words are not unnecessary, but rather meaningful guidance from her father. At that moment, she feels that she truly understands AIDS, his past, and the meaning behind his actions, and she senses that she has drawn a little closer to his heart. Whelmy wonders whether she is merely indulging in her own imagination. Even so, she resolves that she will never leave AIDS, even if he someday grows tired of her, because she herself will never grow tired of him. AIDS asks Whelmy to call him by his name instead of his title, and he also asserts that Whelmy has no right to leave him, as she belongs entirely to him. Whelmy perceives his words as if she is some kind of treasured possession, and she hopes that, at the very least, her feelings have successfully reached him. Aides turns his attention to the matter of Arvine's punishment and considers Whelmy's position regarding it. Whelmy feels confused as to why Aides even asks her opinion, because she has never had any interest in a foolish man who fails to see Iora's true character. To Whelmy, Arvine is someone insignificant, a person who lacks the ability to judge others properly. Aides explains that Arvine's family itself commits no crime and therefore cannot be punished directly. However, Arvine's own conduct is shameful and degrading enough that it can still be used as grounds for severe disciplinary action. Even after hearing this, Whelmy remains emotionally detached. What truly angers her is not Arvine himself, but the fact that he stains Iora's reputation through malicious words and reckless behavior. Although the situation ends up benefiting Whelmy in some ways, that does not lessen her anger. Aides understands her feelings clearly and decides that he will take measures to ensure that Arvine can no longer interfere in Whelmy's or Iora's lives in any form. At the same time, Arvine spends his days confined in prison, struggling to understand why everything has turned against him so suddenly. He is cut off from all communication, forbidden from contacting anyone until the investigation into his family is fully concluded and his own punishment is formally decided. Days pass slowly, and after 10 days of isolation, Arvine grows restless and impatient. He desperately wants to escape the suffocating uncertainty and leave the prison behind. Eventually, a guard appears and informs him that he is required to attend an interview. Arvine is escorted to a room and told to sit, only to discover that the person waiting for him is Aides Ormerage, the feared ruler of magic and a man known for his cold authority. Aides formally informs Arvine that he now stands accused of treason. He further explains that the king grants him the authority to judge whether there are any mitigating circumstances worth considering. The severity of the final outcome depends entirely on Arvine's conduct from this point forward. Arvine immediately understands that Aides has no reason to view him favorably. Aides is the one who rescues Iora and is preparing to marry Whelmy, and that fact alone makes Arvine certain that no mercy will be extended to him easily. He is fully aware that treason is one of the gravest crimes imaginable, and that the harshest punishment is execution carried out before the public. The realization sends a deep shock through him, causing his body to tremble as fear tightens its grip on his mind. Aides calmly observes Arvine's reaction. He acknowledges that Arvine is foolish, yet not entirely devoid of intelligence. Arvine is still capable of understanding the danger of his current situation and recognizing the nature of the man who stands before him. Aides reflects on how foolish people are often the most unpredictable. When they realize that he holds decisive influence, they usually rush to excuse themselves, insisting that they are innocent and desperately listing reasons why their actions should be forgiven. They cling to any possibility of leniency, hoping to save themselves through shallow justifications. Arvine notices that he does not behave in that manner. He does not beg or immediately deny everything, and he senses that Aides is fully aware of this difference. At the same time, Arvine suspects that Aides may be deliberately attempting to unsettle him, hoping to provoke carelessness or force him to reveal something damaging. Aides, however, dismisses this hesitation and continues his assessment. He makes it clear that Arvine's actions are foolish not because of ignorance, but because of arrogance. Arvine openly insults Iora, the very woman he desires as his future fiancée. He then spreads malicious rumors that tarnish her name, actions that disgust Whelmy and mislead her through poisonous gossip. Finally, Arvine commits his most unforgivable mistake by showing disrespect toward the crown prince himself. That single reckless act seals his fate and leads directly to his imprisonment, leaving him trapped by the consequences of his own behavior. Aides observes Arvine carefully and considers whether the long hours of isolation have brought him any sense of calm. Arvine feels irritated by the way Aides looks at him, especially by the cold, emotionless gaze that never wavers. Aides reflects that Arvine once stands at a crossroads where a different choice could have led him toward either Iora or Whelmy. Despite being given many opportunities, Arvine is never truly chosen by those wise sisters. To Aides, this fact alone carries a clear meaning. Arvine reacts with resentment, sensing that Aides may have come only to humiliate him. Yet from Aides' perspective, Arvine is surrounded by countless chances that he himself fails to recognize. Aides recalls Iora as a child, brought to the Schneeger residence by her biological mother, then remembers seeing her again years later at the Noble Academy, and finally recalls the image of Iora standing beside him half a year earlier, composed and striking in her beauty. Alongside these memories, the image of Whelmy also comes to mind. Whelmy during their school days, Whelmy embracing Arvine at the graduation celebration, and Whelmy standing firm and resolute on the night of the grand ball. These recollections blur together, leaving Arvine confused by the contrast between what he once had and what he ultimately loses. Although Arvine is formally engaged to Iora, his memories of her are surprisingly few and shallow. In contrast, his memories of Whelmy are far more numerous. They are not limited to moments of conflict that arise whenever he glances toward Iora, or to the events of that single night. They also include many images of Whelmy smiling with determination, standing beside him day after day. For 4 full years at school, Arvine and Whelmy are constantly together, yet in the end, Whelmy chooses Aides. This reality unsettles Arvine deeply. Arvine suspects that Aides comes merely to flaunt the fact that Whelmy now belongs to him. He considers such a reason childish, even though he himself once parades Whelmy openly during their school years. Aides, however, makes it clear through his demeanor that he does not waste time on petty displays of superiority. From the beginning, his purpose is judgment, not mockery. Aides reflects on Arvine's academic path. Arvine starts in an exclusive class, much like Whelmy and Iora at the beginning of their education. By the second year, however, Iora deliberately transfers to a regular class to keep a low profile, while Arvine is demoted to the lowest-ranking class among them all. Arvine struggles to see the point of this recollection. He has never considered himself special, largely because he never feels motivated to study seriously. Even if he excels, he believes he will inherit nothing from his family. His outlook changes only when someone is adopted into the family of his fiancée and still receives a noble title. At that moment, Arvine recalls meeting Iora in his youth, the legitimate daughter of Earl Ernest. Arvine acknowledges that he desires Iora for her beauty at that time. To secure her, he vows to his father that he will become worthy enough to one day take over the family. Through effort and ambition, he succeeds and becomes her fiancé. By all logic, he should remain by Iora's side. Yet Aides cannot understand why Arvine degenerates into foolishness upon entering the Noble Academy. Arvine offers no response, remaining silent in the face of this observation. Aides emphasizes that Arvine is given repeated chances to awaken to reality. A single different action, taken at the right time, could have changed everything. From Aides' perspective, Arvine grows disappointed when he sees Iora again at the academy, finding her appearance neglected and lacking the elegance he expects. At the same time, he grows comfortable with Whelmy, who clings to him affectionately. Arvine convinces himself that Whelmy harbors feelings for him, and this belief feeds his arrogance. He assumes that he can still inherit his family's noble title even if he replaces his fiancée. Aides views this way of thinking as fundamentally flawed. To him, Iora and Whelmy resemble 2 flowers in full bloom, each distinct and irreplaceable. Neither can serve as a substitute for the other. He considers whether Arvine ever truly tries to become a suitable partner for either of them, whether he ever makes an effort to understand who they are as individuals. Arvine, however, holds no such intention. He sees no reason to make that effort, and in that refusal lies the core of his downfall. Arvine is filled with regret, realizing that if he understands everything earlier or truly takes the time to know them as people, he might not be sitting in front of Aides at this moment. He keeps imagining alternative outcomes, wondering if things could change if even one of them chooses to work harder and refuses to abandon their own path. Through Aides' calm reasoning, it becomes clear that a woman does not need a man in order to grow. Even so, no matter what kind of flower it is, it eventually withers without water. Arvine continues to drown in his assumptions. He imagines that if only he cares about why Iora appears in such a miserable state when he meets her again, if only he sends her a single flower or visits her home, the situation might shift. Aides' perspective exposes the flaw in this thinking. When Arvine sees a withered flower, he fails to imagine a future where it blooms fully, and instead chooses to mock it for its weakness. This attitude defines his failure. Arvine's thoughts spiral further. He imagines that if Iora manages to escape her family's household, if he offers even minimal guidance as her fiancé, the outcome could differ. In that imagined future, Whelmy might acknowledge his existence. Even if Whelmy cannot save herself from the collapse of the Ernest family, Arvine believes that if he treats Whelmy sincerely and with enough effort, Whelmy might not turn against him during the chaos and drag him down together with the Ernest family. He regrets that he never honestly recognizes Whelmy's strengths when she first comes into his life. In his mind, Arvine speculates that Whelmy might become the cause of the Ernest family's destruction, yet still accept him as a husband, even if Whelmy eventually arranges Iora's marriage. Upon reflection, Arvine understands that all of these thoughts are nothing more than empty speculation. He questions why all of this happens to him and admits, at least internally, that he is not surprised that Whelmy leaves him behind. From Aides' analysis, Arvine finally reaches the core truth. Arvine does nothing. He ignores effort, shuts his eyes to reality, and indulges in his own pride. What Arvine truly lacks is not opportunity or talent, but effort itself. Arvine then compares himself to Aides and assumes that Aides must feel superior. He believes Aides is simply fortunate, someone who never needs to struggle. In Arvine's eyes, Aides is born handsome, possesses purple eyes that signify extraordinary mana, and stands as the successor to the Marquis family across the entire Lionel kingdom. Aides holds wealth, status, and authority, all of which can easily earn Whelmy's trust, and he even has the royal family standing beside him. Yet Aides' reality is far from effortless. The immense mana he possesses from birth holds no value without rigorous magical training and extensive knowledge. Without discipline, that power is nothing more than unused potential. To maintain immense authority and status, a person must possess equally immense capability. Power demands responsibility, effort, and constant refinement. Aides recognizes that Arvine likely resents his appearance and circumstances. However, this resentment should never be directed inward. Instead, Arvine should look at Iora and Whelmy. The belief that a woman can remain beautiful without effort is fundamentally flawed. As Iora grows and changes, it becomes evident that beauty does not rely solely on outward appearance. Without sustained effort, inner clarity, and deep resilience, beauty cannot endure. Proper etiquette exists for a reason. Noble behavior is not inherently elegant. It becomes elegant through constant practice. This principle applies equally to men. Beauty is not achieved merely by decorating the body with wealth. It is the result of steady, disciplined, and sincere effort. Aides frames this truth through clear parallels. A knight wields a sword effectively because he trains his body relentlessly. A civil official solves complex problems because he actively seeks knowledge and applies it with care. People who commit themselves to such effort become admirable not because of what they are given, but because of what they earn. The same principle governs wealth, status, and authority. None of these hold meaning without the labor and responsibility required to sustain them. Aides explains that there are many foolish people who believe they can achieve power, status, or authority simply by being born as the eldest son, by marrying a woman who is an heir to her family, or by pushing aside those who stand above them. From Aides' perspective, this assumption often proves true in reality. Those methods do allow people to reach the top, yet it is always the weak who suffer in the process, while the foolish remain standing above everyone else without consequence. Aides reflects that no matter how wise Iora is, she is still only a child at the time, someone who has no real means to reject the treatment imposed upon her. At the same time, Whelmy exists in a position where she is unable to save the person she wishes to protect, despite her intentions. Aides urges Arvine to imagine the weight and hardship borne by those who are given responsibility from birth, those who are expected to protect the weak and prevent suffering, regardless of their own desires. Through this reflection, Arvine realizes that he himself is at least forced to study if he is ever to replace his older brother. He remembers that his father treats his elder brother far more harshly. Arvine once believes this is because his father expects his brother to succeed, unlike himself. Only now does Arvine understand that the truth is different. His brother must be treated more strictly precisely because he carries responsibility for the weak, because he must reduce, even slightly, the number of people who suffer due to foolish individuals like Arvine. Arvine becomes aware that he never even tries to be as good as his peers. He assumes that once he gains what he wants, everything is finished, even though the path ahead remains long and demanding. He fails to consider that both Iora and Whelmy need someone who can support them throughout prolonged suffering. Arvine finally recognizes that his thoughts revolve solely around himself, and Aides affirms this realization. From Aides' viewpoint, A truly foolish person lives an entire lifetime without ever understanding this truth. Such people blame others, circumstances, or fate for their failures, never once turning inward to reflect on their own shortcomings. Arvine observes Aides closely and finds him impressive in every aspect, from his composure to the depth of meaning behind his words. Everything about Aides feels fundamentally different from Arvine himself. Arvine senses that comparison is unnecessary. If anyone is given a choice between the two of them, the outcome is obvious, and everyone would choose Aides. Aides acknowledges that now Arvine understands the core of the issue. It becomes possible to resolve the matter with a fine rather than harsher punishment. This realization shocks Arvine. Aides explains that someone who is truly foolish never feels regret. He admits that he misjudges Arvine, because Arvine does not repeat the same mistake endlessly, nor does he cling so tightly to narrow thinking that he becomes incapable of admitting his own errors. Arvine notices that Aides' eyes appear apathetic, yet he understands that this impression comes from Aides' sharpness rather than indifference. Aides looks at Arvine as an individual, in the same way he looks at Whelmy, who possesses red eyes of her own. Aides makes it clear that Whelmy does not wish for Arvine to receive a severe punishment. Whelmy considers that she and Arvine have made use of one another, each benefiting from the situation in their own way. Aides explains that after Arvine reflects on his foolish life and fully realizes that he has trampled upon the lives of Iora and Whelmy for 4 years, he will arrange an opportunity for Arvine to apologize for what he has done. Until that time arrives, Aides strictly forbids Arvine from contacting either Whelmy or Iora. Upon hearing this, Arvine breaks down in tears and feels overwhelmed, because he believes it is impossible for him to ever reach the level that Whelmy stands on. Arvine comes to the painful conclusion that Whelmy is chosen by Aides, and that Iora is chosen by the Crown Prince with Aides' approval. From the very beginning, there is never a possibility for Arvine to obtain either of them. With this understanding, Arvine expresses his gratitude to Aides with sincere respect, and Aides responds with a smile. Aides then leaves, advising Arvine to become a man who can be chosen by others rather than someone who merely desires to be chosen. Arvine feels both relieved and deeply ashamed at the same time. After Arvine is released on bail, his father subjects him to harsh punishment, and his older brother strikes him as well. Both of them scold Arvine repeatedly, yet Arvine does not feel anger toward either of them. Instead, he accepts their treatment and apologizes. They ask him what he intends to do next with his life. In response, Arvine begins to consider joining the knighthood stationed at the southern border. Even if there are people willing to adopt Arvine into their family, he recognizes that he currently has no confidence in his ability to govern a territory properly. He believes he is not intelligent enough to become a civil official. Arvine concludes that if he can become someone useful by training his body and truly learning what has been placed before him, he may one day become a person who is acknowledged by others. His father remarks that the knights of the southern border are exceptionally tough. Arvine answers that this harshness is exactly what he seeks. Arvine understands that he will most likely never meet Aides, Whelmy, or Iora again. Even so, he holds on to the hope that one day he will be acknowledged by all 3 of them. When that day eventually comes and their paths cross again, Arvine wishes to offer an apology that is honest, clear, and sincere, spoken with full awareness of everything he has done. Savrin keeps wondering why all of this happens to him. He now faces execution by hanging until death, and his noble status is stripped away entirely. Savrin is born as the second son of the Ernest family. As an act of rebellion against his nagging father and his rigid older brother, he chooses to spend his youth indulging in play rather than responsibility. For a long time, he believes this way of living is his freedom. A turning point eventually arrives when Savrin's older brother, who inherits the title of Earl from their late father, dies unexpectedly. With that death, the responsibility and right to the inheritance fall to Savrin. However, every relative opposes the idea of Savrin taking over the title, and their rejection deeply infuriates him. To Savrin, it feels natural and justified for him to assume the title, because it is his rightful claim. He does not believe that he is inferior to his father or his older brother, whom he regards as narrow-minded and stingy. Because of this conflict, Savrin approaches his sister-in-law, the wife of his deceased brother. In Savrin's eyes, she is merely what remains of his brother, yet she holds the sympathy and support of all their relatives. Savrin offers her a deal, proposing that if she supports him, he will transfer his inheritance rights to her child after the child is born. His sister-in-law delays her answer, keeping Saverin waiting in vain, while holding on to the hope that Saverin will somehow secure the Earl's seat. In reality, she is already pregnant with her late husband's child, who carries his bloodline, which means she has no need to support Saverin at all. This revelation leaves Saverin deeply irritated and resentful toward her. In his frustration, Saverin commits a grave crime. He forces a commoner, drags her into a carriage, takes her to his second estate, and assaults her. That commoner is Isabella. At first, Isabella cries in despair, but over time she becomes submissive. Saverin allows her to remain on his land and provides for her needs. At the same time, Saverin places the responsibilities of managing the Earl's duties onto his sister-in-law instead. Saverin has no interest in women he cannot possess physically, no matter how beautiful they may be. Gordley, who constantly stays by his sister-in-law's side, becomes a persistent nuisance, and Saverin chooses to exploit him instead. Isabella becomes pregnant very quickly, leaving Saverin little time to indulge himself. Yet he takes some satisfaction in knowing the child is his. After his sister-in-law dies, Saverin brings the beautiful Isabella and her child, Whelmy, into his household. As a result of these actions, Saverin's relatives begin to sever all ties with him. His servants also resign one after another, until only Gordley and a few aides remain. Saverin becomes determined that Whelmy will one day succeed him. In pursuit of this goal, Isabella suggests that they abuse Iora. Isabella provokes Saverin into committing this cruelty, convincing him that he is doing nothing wrong. Despite everything, Iora remains stubbornly resilient. No matter how much time passes, Iora does not break. Eventually, Saverin shifts his anger toward other targets to vent his frustration. He even fails to kill Iora, using magical items he purchases specifically for that purpose. Saverin grows increasingly confused about what he should do next, and he begins to suspect that bankruptcy is inevitable. At this point, the Schneeger family, who still hold the title of Viscount at the time, agree to lend Saverin money in exchange for their second son, Arvine, who is already engaged to Iora. This arrangement gives Saverin a sense of comfort. He assumes that Iora will die long before the marriage takes place, and therefore the engagement will eventually be annulled. With this belief, Saverin receives a large sum of money immediately. Saverin then hands over the management of his domain to Iora and Gordley. There is no particular reason for this decision, other than the fact that, as the head of the family, he feels no need to involve himself. He believes there are far more enjoyable ways to spend his money. Afterward, Saverin creates a second set of accounting books and commits tax fraud so that he can keep more money for himself. He places the blame for this scheme on Gordley, claiming that Gordley is the one who teaches him how to do it. Saverin indulges in endless speculation. He imagines that if his sister-in-law becomes his wife, if Isabella does not betray him, and if Gordley does not initiate the fraud, then everything would belong to them. He continues to question why he alone faces the death penalty and why everything turns out this way. In his own mind, Saverin remains convinced that he has never done anything wrong. The officials later inform Isabella that Saverin has been executed. Upon hearing this, Isabella feels that everything is finally over and has unfolded exactly according to her plan, even though it takes an extremely long time to reach this point. Isabella herself comes from an orphanage, and she once believes that she will spend her entire life as a humble commoner with no future beyond that, until the day she meets Clartz. Clartz proposes marriage to her. At that time, Isabella works as Clartz's guide when he visits the orphanage to provide medical care. Isabella notices how carefully Clartz observes every patient without exception. In her eyes, Clartz appears timid, devoid of malice, and treats everyone equally. Isabella feels genuine happiness when Clartz looks at her with his beautiful red eyes while asking about her. Despite that, Isabella apologizes internally and outwardly because she believes she is completely unfit to become a duchess. She has no parents, no wealth, and no formal education, and she is convinced that staying with Clartz will only drag him down. She cannot rid herself of the feeling that she is not good enough for him. Nevertheless, Clartz decides that he is willing to abandon his noble family because he wants to be with Isabella. This decision shocks her deeply, as she cannot believe that Clartz is prepared to give up something so significant for her sake. Eventually, Isabella accepts Clartz's proposal, and the two of them share a period of profound happiness together. After their marriage, One day Isabella and Clartz walk through the city shortly after signing a contract for a house of their own. During that time, Clartz goes to the Duke's residence to discuss several matters. While Clartz is away at his family's home, Isabella is suddenly abducted by Saverin and assaulted by him. Isabella develops an intense hatred toward Saverin, and for the first time in her life, she hates someone so deeply that she wishes to kill him. At the same time, fear overwhelms her. She worries that Clartz will feel disgusted by her after she has been violated, and she wonders whether she can continue living beside him without ever revealing the truth. After some time passes, Isabella notices that her body feels strange. Her menstruation does not come for a long while, and nausea begins to trouble her. She becomes consumed by uncertainty, questioning whether the child she carries belongs to Clartz or to Saverin, the man she despises. Isabella believes that if she continues living with Clartz and the child turns out to be Saverin's, Clartz will eventually go to the Duke's house and sign divorce papers. To prevent this outcome, Isabella gathers all of her money and makes it appear as though she runs away and becomes Saverin's mistress. When the baby is born, the child has red eyes, marking one of Isabella's descendants as carrying noble blood. What brings Isabella the greatest relief is the realization that Whelmy is, in fact, Clartz's child. Isabella cannot allow Whelmy to face a life of unhappiness. For that reason, after Saverin's wife dies and Saverin seeks to marry her, Isabella makes a firm decision. She resolves to ensure that Saverin's repulsive bloodline ends here by removing Iora from the family and replacing her with Whelmy, thereby bringing the Earl's lineage to its conclusion. Isabella plans that once Whelmy grows up and becomes the heir, she will ensure Whelmy's happiness. After that, she intends to kill Saverin, then Iora, and finally herself. Isabella lives solely to bring this plan to completion. Even so, Isabella harbors regret over what she has done to Iora. On that day, Isabella learns for the first time that Iora is the child of a former noble. If that information is true, then Iora is not Saverin's daughter at all. If Isabella had known this earlier, she would not have tortured the girl whom Whelmy loves so deeply. Even so, Isabella does not allow herself to dwell on regret, because she believes she has no right to justify or undo what she has done. To Isabella, the only thing that truly matters is the child who carries Clartz's blood, Whelmy. At the same time, Isabella senses that Whelmy is planning something. She never once imagines that Whelmy is contemplating an ending far more intricate and unsettling than Isabella's own idea of revenge. When Saverin finally realizes that he has lost everything, his shock is unmistakable. In that moment, Isabella finds it extremely difficult to suppress her laughter or resist revealing the truth to him. She regards Whelmy as an exceptionally intelligent child. Rather than becoming foolish like Isabella herself, Whelmy resembles Clartz far more closely. If there is one thing Isabella regrets in her life after choosing the path of revenge, it is that she eventually meets Clartz again. After encountering Isabella, she is certain that she has stirred painful emotions within Clartz, and she knows that Clartz understands that she did not merely run away. However, as long as Clartz continues to regard her as an unfortunate woman, that alone is enough for Isabella. In her mind, there is no reason for a good man like Clartz to suffer heartbreak because of a woman like her. Isabella decides to keep everything to herself, so that no one else ever needs to know what truly happens on that day. Now, Isabella sees that Whelmy can live happily alongside her beloved sister and Clartz. Because of this, Isabella believes that Whelmy no longer needs a foolish mother like herself. When Isabella prepares to depart for the northern convent, she discovers that Gordley is the one escorting her carriage. Isabella expresses her gratitude to him, yet Gordley feels that he is unworthy of receiving thanks from her. To Isabella, Gordley has always been a thorn in her side, because he consistently helps Iora. At the same time, however, he also assists Whelmy in bringing down Saverin. Isabella remains curious about what Gordley truly seeks to gain from doing all of this. Gordley then conveys that he carries a message from the Marquis. Isabella wonders what the message contains. Gordley quietly informs her that Aides will not tell Clartz or Whelmy about any of this. Isabella is shocked and momentarily panicked, because she suspects that Aides knows about her plans, even though she has no idea how Aides could have learned of them. After regaining her composure, Isabella asks Gordley to pass along her gratitude to Aides, and Gordley agrees to do so. Isabella reflects on how sharp a man's perception can be. She does not truly know the answer, but she hopes that Gordley and Aides will continue to protect Whelmy properly. With that thought in mind, Isabella finally arrives at the northern convent. Some time later, Gordley arrives at Aides' residence and reports that he has successfully delivered the message to Isabella. After hearing this, Aides requests that Gordley inform Clartz or Whelmy of the full truth in detail if the two of them ever come to realize it on their own. Gordley, however, hopes that such a day will never arrive, and he is confident that Isabella wishes for the same outcome. Afterward, Aides turns his attention to Gordley's family name and expresses curiosity about it. Gordley reveals that his original surname is Schneeger. Aides is not surprised by this revelation and reflects on why the Schneeger family maintains such a close connection with the Ernest family, whom he regards as thieves. He wonders whether the Schneeger family has been tied to the Ernest family for a long time. Gordley explains that the Schneeger family originally serves in a supporting role. For several generations, the most talented individual of the Schneeger lineage is selected to manage the affairs of the Ernest family. Aides then considers whether Arvine is permitted to change his fiancée because he distances himself from his family. Gordley clarifies that even if there is a justification, it exists because Iora is the sole legitimate heir and possesses exceptional talent. Hearing this, Aides reacts with quiet amusement and reflects that Iora is far too remarkable to be confined to the role of a mere countess, or even to remain only an earl. In Aides' view, it seems that the Schneeger family, in their role as subordinates, collectively agrees that Iora is far better suited to inspire the nation as a crown princess, and eventually as a queen, rather than simply restoring the Ernest family as a countship. Gordley reflects that if Saverin had truly been competent, or if Iora had not been the heir, he would never have participated in Whelmy's plan. He explains that although the Schneeger family does not share the Ernest name, they have sworn loyalty to that bloodline. This loyalty is precisely why the Schneeger family ultimately dismantles the Ernest family, not out of betrayal, but to elevate Iora to a far greater stage. They make a deliberate decision to stop producing capable stewards and instead allow the Schneeger family itself to flourish. In this way, if something were ever to happen, they could support Iora from the outside. The one who informs the Schneeger family and urges them to make this decisive choice is Gordley himself. Aides praises Gordley as a loyal retainer, and Gordley feels deeply honored to receive such generous recognition. Aides also observes that Gordley is exceptionally skilled at concealing his true fangs, masking his sharpness beneath restraint. Aides then seeks Gordley's opinion on the idea of granting the Schneeger family control over the Ernest territory. Gordley responds that it is not his place to recommend such a decision, and that Aides is free to act as he sees fit. Aides then considers Gordley's future path, recognizing that Gordley still requires someone with influence within the royal family to continue supporting Iora. Gordley expresses his gratitude for Aides' offer, but before accepting anything, he wishes to take a brief leave. He also mentions that his most talented nephew has finally become aware of his own foolishness. Aides suspects that Gordley intends to give Arvine personal guidance. Afterward, Aides decides to write a letter to the Margrave, though he initially struggles to determine what position he should recommend. After some contemplation, he settles on proposing a role as a tutor. If Arvine harbors the ambition to resume his studies while continuing his training as a knight, Aides is willing to provide financial support. Gordley considers this an exceptionally generous offer. Finally, Aides remarks that Gordley could choose to retire, yet he clearly sees Gordley as someone cunning and eccentric by nature. Gordley reflects that now, having finally completed his long and arduous work, he can turn his attention to pursuits that truly interest him. With that thought, he quietly looks forward to his later years. For years after the night of the grand banquet, Aria comes to visit Whelmy, and Whelmy receives her warmly. By this time, Whelmy has spent a long period reflecting on her life since becoming a housewife and experiencing pregnancy. She finds herself thinking deeply about her mother and questioning why Isabella harbors such intense hatred toward Iora. Whelmy considers the possibility that Isabella's hostility stems from her love for Whelmy and her desire for Whelmy to become the heir to the earldom. Yet Whelmy senses that this explanation alone is not sufficient. Hearing these thoughts, Aria is taken aback and falls into silence. Whelmy continues to wonder whether her mother is truly happy. She recalls how frightening Isabella appears whenever she looks at Iora with eyes filled with open hostility. At the same time, Whelmy questions whether Iora is truly the target of her mother's hatred or merely a symbol of something deeper. Whelmy has also heard that her father is preparing to travel north, and she assumes that he intends to meet Isabella. Once again, Aria remains silent, unable to respond. Not long after, Aria seeks out Clartz, who is in the midst of preparing magical tools that Iora has provided. Aria calls out to him and mentions that Whelmy has told her about his plan to travel north. She asks about his destination, and Clartz explains that he is heading to the northern monastery. He feels that he must speak with Isabella at least once, although he is uncertain whether he should tell her about Whelmy's pregnancy. Aria then asks whether Clartz has the time to listen to an old story. Aria confesses that she hates Isabella for the way she treats Iora, and Clartz agrees with her feelings. At the same time, he acknowledges that Isabella is always kind to Whelmy and to the servants. Isabella often speaks of her past as a commoner and insists that everyone is equal. Although these events occurred long ago, Aria remembers clearly that Isabella never forgets to thank the servants, gives them time to rest when they appear exhausted, and steps in as a mediator when conflicts arise among them, listening carefully to their grievances. Yet whenever Isabella is with Iora, she becomes a completely different person. Aria has long been troubled by this contradiction. She cannot understand why Isabella is so cruel to Iora while remaining gentle and considerate toward everyone else. This question continues to linger in her mind. Aria recalls a past incident when Whelmy falls into the river and suffers from a high fever. During that time, Isabella never personally nurses Whelmy back to health. Instead, she orders Iora to care for her, which fills Aria with anger. What shocks Aria even more is that after everything, Isabella blames Iora and even strikes her. Later, when Aria leaves the room to fetch clean water, she finds Isabella sitting quietly in the hall. The sound of water carried by Aria catches Isabella's attention, and with a soft smile, Isabella asks her to be quiet. Isabella admits that her earlier behavior may have frightened Whelmy. She then urges Aria to rest, noting how unwell Aria looks, and suggests that she take a nap. Isabella takes the water herself and places it by the door. When Aria asks whether she may tell Iora to rest as well, Isabella insists that it is Aria's turn to rest and tells her to obey. At the time, Aria does not understand the meaning behind Isabella's actions. She never speaks of this incident to Iora or Whelmy, fearing that it would only bring them pain. On another occasion, Aria overhears Isabella muttering in her room, wishing that Iora were a more troublesome child so that she could be dealt with more easily. Aria shares this memory with Clartz, believing that he might gain some insight from it. Clartz thanks her for telling him. Clartz reflects that Isabella has never truly changed. He once believes that Isabella might become a different person after experiencing luxury, or perhaps he himself has been deceived all along. It has always been difficult for Clartz to make Isabella believe in anything beyond her own convictions, which is why it takes him so long to gather the courage to meet her again. He admits that he is weak-willed and fearful. He cannot stop thinking that he may have caused Isabella pain, believing that she is foolish and unable to see herself clearly, only to realize that his own eyes may have been closed in a different way. Clartz says that he will remember how Aria once saw Isabella, because the Isabella who leaves him is someone he remembers as kind-hearted. Even after facing the facts, he still cannot fully convince himself that Isabella is a deceiver. Aria's words help him regain a measure of belief. Aria herself does not know what will come of this conversation, but she realizes that a small part of her remains incapable of hating Isabella completely. Afterward, Aria returns to Iora, who has been waiting for her. Now Aria serves Countess Ernest, and her baronial family receives assistance so that they do not need to relinquish their noble title. Because Aria acts as an attendant to the crown princess, she is formally granted the title of Viscountess. This title is purely honorary, cannot be inherited, and has no connection to marriage. Yet after Aria's new status becomes known, her siblings begin to receive several favorable marriage proposals. None of this concerns Aria herself. She has already sworn that she will serve only Iora and Whelmy for the rest of her life, leaving her with no time or intention to think about anyone else. Still, if it is ever possible, Aria hopes that Whelmy can one day make peace with Isabella. She understands that Whelmy leads everyone toward destruction in order to save Iora, and she accepts that reality. Yet if reconciliation could ease even a fraction of the sorrow that Whelmy carries now, Aria would feel content. Above all else, Aria wishes for the health and safety of Whelmy and Iora, and that single wish is enough for her. In the northern monastery, Isabella spends her days in prayer. After finishing her prayers, she is informed that a visitor has come to see her. When she sees Clartz, Isabella is genuinely shocked and immediately wonders why he has come to this place. She steps outside to meet the head nun and begs her not to force a meeting between herself and Clartz. The head nun explains that this cannot be avoided, because Clartz wishes for Isabella to return to secular life. However, the final decision rests entirely with Isabella. The head nun advises her to think carefully and search for her own answer. Since Isabella arrives at the monastery, the head nun has observed how sincerely, earnestly, and anxiously Isabella dedicates herself to prayer. Isabella continually prays for Whelmy, Clartz, and Iora to live in peace. The head nun says that if Isabella ever chooses to return to secular life, she will offer her help, but Isabella refuses this offer. She feels that life in the monastery is undeniably harsh. Although it is not as brutal as forced labor or exile, the severity of the conditions is understandable, as the Church, bound by its strict doctrines, voluntarily accepts women who have committed crimes. Every nun who has spent time here regrets the suffering they endure. Yet for Isabella, this quiet life devoted to daily labor is both punishment and healing. She believes she may wish to spend the rest of her life here. Isabella has long been accustomed to poverty, and the only time she spends lavishly is when she uses money to torment Saverin. Now that the hatred she carries for so many years has finally burned out, she can only feel gratitude for being able to live calmly while gazing into the great emptiness left behind in her heart. With her revenge at last complete, Isabella believes she will have no regrets when she dies. She wishes to devote the remainder of her life solely to prayer. While crying, she pleads with the head nun to allow her to do so. At that moment, Clartz suddenly arrives and calls out to her. Clartz earnestly asks Isabella to speak with him, assuring her that he has no intention of forcing her to do anything ever again. Isabella becomes painfully aware of her own condition. Her hands are cracked until the skin splits and bone seems visible. Her hair is damaged and neglected, and deep wrinkles mark her face. She wears no makeup at all, and she cannot imagine how she could possibly face Clartz in such a state. When Clartz calls to her again, Isabella recoils inwardly, unwilling to let him see her like this, aged, unkempt, and living a life of atonement. She turns her face away and urges him to return home, hiding herself as if that alone might shield her. In her heart, Isabella wonders why Clartz has come all the way here. She fears that perhaps he has come only to laugh at her downfall. Clartz, however, simply stands there in silence, looking at her, yet that quiet gaze is something Isabella cannot endure. She feels compelled to behave like a foolish woman, because she believes that if she does not cling to that role, she will not be able to speak to him at all. She believes she has committed acts so unforgivable that she has no right to stand before Clartz. Clartz makes it clear through his presence and resolve that he does not come here lightly. Isabella, however, refuses to believe him. She assumes that he lies, convinced that he has come to mock her miserable state after what she sees as her betrayal. Clartz insists, through his unwavering composure, that he understands Isabella is not the kind of person she now accuses herself of being. Isabella counters this in her own mind by branding herself a selfish woman who thinks only of herself. She begs Clartz to leave and pleads with him not to speak to her in the familiar tone of their former home, because hearing it threatens to break her composure and make her cry. Clartz does not ridicule her, nor does he show contempt. Instead, he reveals that ever since he meets Whelmy, he begins to question whether Isabella truly betrays him in the way he once believed. From the day Isabella disappears until the moment he learns of Whelmy's existence, Clartz lives as if he is hollow, merely an empty shell going through the motions of life. As he grows closer to Whelmy and witnesses her intelligence, her depth, and the way she carries herself, he begins to wonder if his understanding of the past is wrong. Isabella insists that Clartz is not mistaken. In her view, the truth is simple and unforgiving. Yet Clartz observes that Whelmy does not behave like someone raised by a faithless woman driven by shallow desires. That observation becomes too much for Isabella to bear. She begs him to stop, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. She insists that Whelmy's actions, especially those that could be seen as betrayal of her parents, are not something Isabella ever teaches her. She believes that Whelmy learns everything from the servants, from Gordley, and from Lady Colwella, all of whom raise Whelmy properly and instill strong values in her. Clartz, however, remembers that Isabella raises Whelmy alone until the child reaches the age of 8. He recalls Whelmy telling him that Isabella treats her kindly, and he remembers Aria's words about Isabella's consistent kindness toward the servants. To Clartz, Isabella remains the gentle and compassionate woman he knows, except for her behavior toward Iora. Even so, he recognizes that this contradiction exists within the same woman he once loves. That realization does not erase his feelings. Isabella cannot endure hearing this. She repeatedly urges Clartz to leave, refusing to listen any longer. In her mind, the Isabella Clartz knows already dies at Saverin's hands, and nothing can undo that. Everything feels irreversibly late. She reflects bitterly that if only she does not act carelessly in the past, if only she recognizes Saverin's intentions earlier, Clartz would never have been hurt. Even though she believes all of this suffering is her fault, and even though she does not want Clartz to realize it, Isabella cannot deny a quiet truth buried deep inside her heart. She feels a fragile, unwanted sense of relief and warmth simply because Clartz comes to see her. Still, she continues to urge him to return home, pleading with him not to look at a woman she considers ugly, broken, and ruined. Clartz closes the distance between them and gently places a hand on her shoulder. Isabella stands there, seeing herself only as an aged source of chaos, yet Clartz's touch lingers, steady and real, refusing to disappear.